A fierce battle unfolds in a fiery coliseum as a white-haired king stands victorious but broken over the lifeless body of a dark-haired woman named Cecilia. The king screams in pure agony over her tragic death. He then takes the throne to rule his world. He becomes the strongest king in existence, wearing a silver crown and a flowing red cape as he leads his forces to countless victories. He commands massive fleets of dark, bird-shaped airships that drop devastating bombs on enemy cities. These attacks leave nothing but smoke and rubble in their wake. Despite holding ultimate power and securing his kingdom, the king feels entirely empty and unfulfilled. He wanders his grand castle and looks at his royal armor, realizing his life is utterly devoid of true freedom. Eventually, his reign ends, and he finds his consciousness floating through a dark, ethereal void filled with luminous blue bubbles. A mysterious voice echoes through the darkness, wishing him light in his new life just as a blinding golden star consumes his vision. Suddenly, he wakes up in a rustic wooden room and sees two unfamiliar people looking down at him with immense joy. The man is Reinald and the woman is Alice. They happily introduce themselves as his parents and call him Arthur. He quickly pieces together that he has been reincarnated into a new world. He is completely trapped inside the tiny, powerless body of a newborn baby. He feels totally frustrated by his situation. He retains all the memories, combat experience, and tactical knowledge of a victorious king, yet he cannot even form words or control his own limbs. His daily routine devolves into a humiliating cycle of being burped, fed, and having his diapers changed. Arthur views his new, fragile flesh as nothing more than a prison and desperately wishes this bizarre dream would just end. However, as the days go by, he accepts his new reality. He decides that since his physical body is useless, he must use his mind. He treats knowledge as his greatest weapon and begins carefully observing his parents to understand the rules of this strange new environment. One afternoon, he watches from a window as Reinald trains outside the house. Reinald wears spiked black and gold bracers and unleashes incredibly powerful martial arts strikes. He projects massive bursts of glowing pinkish-purple energy with his fists to destroy targets. Alice then demonstrates her own abilities by touching Reinald's head and emitting a soothing green magical aura to heal his exhaustion. Arthur realizes that this world is filled with supernatural powers completely unknown to his previous life. Later on, Reinald returns from a hunting trip completely covered in blood. He easily took down a massive dark bull-like monster in the nearby forest. Arthur notes that the people in this society are allowed to freely carry dangerous weapons and use lethal magic. He recognizes the inherent danger of living in such an unregulated world. He resolves to acquire his own power immediately so he can protect himself. However, his infant body keeps him totally dependent on his parents for basic survival. Several months pass, and Arthur finally hits a major physical milestone when he learns how to crawl across the wooden floor. His parents proudly watch him interact with his own reflection in a mirror, but Arthur secretly plots his first real mission. One day, Alice is distracted washing dishes at the kitchen counter. Arthur sneaks down the hallway and makes his way to the family's large wooden bookshelf. He stretches his tiny arms and manages to pull down a heavy, thick book filled with detailed maps and historical texts. Sitting on the floor, he eagerly studies the geography of his new world. He learns that he was born on a massive continent called Dikathin, which is split into 3 major kingdoms. The Kingdom of Darv is a vast network of underground caverns inhabited entirely by the Dwarven race. The Kingdom of Elenoir is a secluded, lush forest realm that serves as the homeland for elves. Finally, Arthur discovers that he lives in the Kingdom of Suppin. This is the largest and most populated territory on the continent, and it is ruled entirely by humans. He finds it deeply fascinating that kingship in this kingdom is inherited purely through royal bloodlines. In his past life, rulers violently took power by force. He also observes that the overall technological level of this world is incredibly primitive when compared to the advanced flying vehicles and towering silver skyscrapers of his previous life. He soon discovers the exact reason for this technological stagnation in another thick green book decorated with gold patterns. The text explains the existence of mana, a mystical energy source that defines the power structures of this society. Arthur reads that the ability to manipulate mana is strictly genetic. Only 1 out of every 100 people is born with the natural talent to wield it. The book breaks down mana users into 2 primary categories. Augmenters enhance their physical bodies with mana to gain incredible superhuman strength, enhanced defense, and lightning-fast agility for close-quarters combat. Conjurers, on the other hand, emit their mana into the outside world to manipulate their environment. This allows them to cast powerful elemental spells from a distance. To become a fully recognized mage, an individual must gather the scattered fragments of mana naturally residing within their body. They must fuse these fragments together to form a centralized mana core. The book states that this awakening process usually occurs naturally during early adolescence or the late teenage years. Arthur immediately draws a parallel between this world's mana and the concept of ki from his previous life. In his old world, controlling ki required a person to recognize their internal energy and focus it into a specific center point in their body. He wonders if his past life knowledge can give him a massive early advantage. Arthur sits cross-legged on the floor, closes his eyes, and attempts to sense the mana resting inside him. He successfully locates a glowing golden energy pooling in his abdomen. Unfortunately, his intense concentration causes him to accidentally soil his diaper. Alice quickly swoops in to change him, interrupting his grand magical experiment. Despite the humiliating setback, Arthur remains completely determined to master his new abilities. 2 years fly by and Arthur grows into a highly curious but unusually serious toddler who never smiles. Alice frequently writes in her journal about how much she adores him. She also secretly worries about his constant stoic expression. One bright afternoon, Reinald decides it is time to give Arthur an early start on his combat training. He hands the 2-year-old a wooden stick and begins teaching him basic swordsmanship stances in the grassy yard. Alice spots them out the window and absolutely loses her mind. She storms outside, completely furious, and aggressively scolds Reinald. She yells at him for recklessly endangering their toddler, who barely just learned how to walk properly. Reinald cowers in absolute terror and desperately pleads for forgiveness. Arthur calmly watches the chaotic argument unfold. He quickly realizes that Alice is the true dominant force in the household, and jokingly wonders if this entire world operates under a strict matriarchy. Shortly after the scolding, Alice carries Arthur on her back during a trip to a nearby bustling town. This gives him the perfect chance to scout the local economy and culture. They visit a rustic weapon shop filled with heavy falchions, double-edged axes, and spiked maces. Observing the crude craftsmanship of the gear helps Arthur accurately gauge the kingdom's military and technological capabilities. Next, they stop by a merchant stall displaying a wide array of colorful gems and glowing magical crystals. The friendly shopkeeper demonstrates a simple fire spell to entertain the young boy. He instantly sparks a bright orange flame right in the palm of his hand. Arthur eagerly absorbs all this information. He is thrilled to finally witness real magic up close and examine mystical materials that never existed in his old world. As the sun sets, Alice gently carries a sleepy Arthur back home along a peaceful dirt path. Arthur reflects on how deeply his parents care for him. He admits to himself that he has zero complaints about his new life, despite his lack of absolute freedom. He actually starts getting used to the comforting warmth of having a loving family. This is a stark contrast to his incredibly cold and isolated past. Later that night, Alice tucks him into his wooden crib and softly whispers her deepest hopes for his future. She tells him that she notices the passionate spark in his eyes whenever he reads heavy books or explores the market. She attributes his curiosity to Reinald's adventurous bloodline. However, she genuinely hopes Arthur will choose a peaceful, ordinary path in life rather than a violent and dangerous one. After she leaves the room, Arthur stands on a wooden bench and looks out the open window. He watches his father practice martial arts in the yard. Reinald effortlessly shatters a massive gray rock into tiny pieces using his bare hands. He then launches into a series of high-speed kicks that create literal shockwaves in the air. Arthur is thoroughly impressed by the destructive display and confirms his theory that his father is a highly skilled augmenter. Alice soon interrupts the awe-inspiring show by marching into the room. She insists that it is time for Arthur's daily nap. She tries to enforce the house rules and take his book away, but Arthur gives her an irresistible wide-eyed look full of sparkling, innocent wonder. Alice totally caves in to his adorable, manipulative face and allows him to read just a little bit longer. With his mother out of the way, Arthur immediately returns to his secret magical training. He sits cross-legged on the floor next to the giant bookshelf and closes his eyes. He focuses his entire mind on the countless tiny mana fragments scattered throughout his body. For the past 2 years, he has been using his past life experience with Ki to slowly and painfully drag these fragments together. He acknowledges that forcing a mana core to manifest as a toddler is a tremendously dangerous and difficult task. He pushes forward anyway, and successfully pulls the final glowing fragment into place. This completely finishes the formation of his core. Suddenly, the highly concentrated mana inside him triggers an incredibly violent explosive reaction. A massive blast of fiery golden energy erupts from his tiny body. The blast completely obliterates the wooden walls and the grassy roof of the house. Outside, Reinhold and Alice are violently thrown off their feet by the sheer force of the massive explosion. Thick black smoke aggressively billows into the sky as sharp wooden splinters scatter all across the grassy hills. Reinhold instantly realizes Arthur is still trapped inside the blast zone. He sprints toward the burning wreckage in a state of total panic. He rushes through the smoke-filled doorway and stares in absolute horror at the shattered floorboards. Alice arrives moments later and covers her mouth, completely devastated by the ruined state of their home. However, their crushing despair instantly turns into utter shock when they look up through the completely destroyed ceiling. Arthur is casually floating high in the sky, fully enveloped in a radiant golden aura of pure mana. He opens his eyes and smiles brightly, thrilled that his relentless studying and secret magical training have finally paid off. But his arrogant triumph is cut short when the magical energy abruptly fails. He plummets straight down toward the dangerous wreckage below. Arthur believes his second life is about to end prematurely due to his own foolish overconfidence. He quickly braces for a fatal impact. Before he can hit the jagged wooden splinters, Reinhold violently leaps into action. He channels his red magical energy to catch falling debris and literally uses his own body as a human shield to protect his family. Arthur lands safely and looks up to see Reinhold heavily bruised and suffering from a large burn on his back. Despite the injuries, Reinhold still stands protectively over him and Alice. Alice drops to her knees and pulls Arthur into an incredibly tight embrace. She begins sobbing uncontrollably out of sheer relief. Reinhold watches them with a warm, tearful smile, endlessly grateful that his son survived the disaster without a scratch. Arthur is completely stunned by their raw, unfiltered emotional reaction. He watches the heavy tears stream down their faces and listens to them cry out his name with overwhelming, desperate love. In his previous life as a powerful king, the only people who ever protected him were royal guards simply executing their sworn duty. The stoic, white-haired girl who used to defend him in the arena was just following orders. He never experienced genuine affection or selfless sacrifice from anyone. He sees Reinhold and Alice happily risk their lives and cry out of pure terror for his safety. This completely shatters his previous understanding of human relationships. He realizes that this profound, unconditional love is something he never found in the dusty history books of this world. He also never experienced it in his past life. Surrounded by the smoldering ruins of their completely destroyed home, Arthur is deeply moved by his parents' desperate embrace. He silently vows to figure out what this incredible warmth truly means. Back in his past life, King Grey oversees a trial for a man who attempted to assassinate him. The man is brought into a dark room by armored guards holding hooked spears and is forced to sit on the floor. The council has decided to show mercy by sending him and his family back to their home country to await execution, but the man desperately begs Grey to spare his wife and child. He admits his guilt and accepts his brutal punishment, but pleads for his family, knowing that returning home means enduring suffering worse than death. One of the king's advisors tells the man to know his place and says judgment is already passed, but the man continues to cry and beg the king to spare them. Grey decides to take matters into his own hands and personally executes the woman and child with his sword right in front of the man. The advisor praises this as an act of true mercy because the two of them are now spared from endless suffering. Instead of getting angry or seeking revenge, the completely broken man looks up with tears streaming down his face and genuinely thanks King Grey for killing them. In the present, Arthur is now 4 years old and ready to begin his physical combat training with his father in the grassy yard outside their cottage. Reinhold initially wants to give Arthur a dangerous black and gold spiked gauntlet so the boy can fight exactly like him, but he quickly realizes the heavy weapon would just get a small child killed before he could even strike. Instead, Reinhold hands Arthur a simple wooden practice sword and tells him to come right at him. Arthur charges forward with incredible speed and swings the wooden sword. Reinhold easily blocks the strike with his own practice blade and praises his son's form. However, Arthur decides to get serious and channels his mana directly into the wooden weapon. The blade ignites with a glowing orange flame, and Arthur leaps high into the air to strike Reinhold's arm. The sheer force of the fiery blow knocks Reinhold's wooden sword right out of his hands and onto the grass. Arthur happily asks his father how he did, leaving Reinhold completely speechless at his son's terrifying potential. Later that day, Reinhold and Alice sit down inside their house to discuss Arthur's future. Reinhold argues that Arthur is a total prodigy who needs a proper magic teacher in a big city to reach his full potential. He explains that the boy can already cut through solid wood reinforced with mana at just 4 years old, so he needs a real mentor. Alice becomes absolutely furious and completely refuses to send her sweet little boy off to some distant town by himself. Reinhold tries to reason with her, insisting they have to think about his long-term future, but Alice stubbornly hugs Arthur and yells that she wants to keep him close and safe. After a heated argument, Alice finally suggests a third option where the entire family packs up and moves to the city together. Reinhold eagerly agrees, noting that people will definitely call their son a genius once they see his incredible skills. The family quickly packs their belongings and heads out to a green field to join a large traveling caravan. They are escorted by the Twinhorns, the same adventuring party that Reinhold and Alice used to travel with before they retired to the countryside. Arthur introduces himself to the group and formally greets everyone. Adam Crench, a red-haired spearman with a scar on his nose, introduces himself first. Angela Rose, a blonde conjurer in a green dress, happily hugs Arthur and calls him extremely cute while nearly suffocating him against her chest. Durden Walker, a tall and sturdy conjurer in a green shirt, kneels down to gently shake the boy's tiny hand. Helen Shard, a blue-haired elven archer, gently pats Arthur on the head and welcomes him to the group. Finally, Jasmine Flamesworth, a quiet young woman with short black hair and red eyes, simply stares at him until Helen introduces her. With all the introductions out of the way, the group boards a pair of large wooden wagons pulled by giant horned lizard creatures and sets off down the dirt path. Arthur looks out from the wagon and notes how primitive the transportation is compared to the advanced flying metallic pods and neon-lit futuristic cities of his past life. He still finds the slow journey charming and peaceful as they travel alongside towering white cliffs. Eventually, the caravan stops in a lush forest clearing to set up camp for the evening. The men sit around a campfire discussing the dangers of the world, while Alice and Arthur stay safely hidden inside the wagon. Suddenly, a massive pack of giant gray wolves emerges from the dark trees and completely surrounds the campsite. The wolves bare their sharp teeth and launch a coordinated, violent ambush against the travelers. The Twinhorns immediately spring into action to defend the camp. Jasmine leaps through the air with her dual daggers and violently slices several wolves apart in a massive spray of blood. Reinhold uses his martial arts to brutally punch a large wolf in the face, while Adam impales another beast with his spear. Helen stands on top of a wagon and shoots precise arrows into the attacking creatures. Durden projects a radiant yellow orb from his hand that causes a massive explosion of earth and debris to crush multiple enemies at once. Angela follows up by blasting a glowing green magical barrier from her staff to completely knock back the remaining wolves. Arthur watches the flawless teamwork from the safety of the wagon and realizes he needs to become just as strong as them very soon. Later that night, the group sits around the campfires eating roasted meat skewers to celebrate their easy victory. Arthur feels completely full and sits quietly on a log next to Alice. Suddenly, Alice notices a deep bleeding gash on Reinhold's arm from the battle. She quickly uses her glowing green magic to completely heal the wound in mere seconds. A party member notes that Alice is a very special type of mage called an emitter. Her rare healing powers make her extremely valuable, which is why she and Reinhold had to hide in the remote countryside for years to avoid becoming targets for kidnappers. Adam decides he wants some exercise before going to sleep and confidently challenges little Arthur to a sparring match. The rest of the group thinks Adam is crazy for fighting a 4-year-old, but Arthur bravely accepts the challenge. They face off in a dark grassy clearing under the starry sky. Adam smirks and holds his cloth-wrapped spear ready, clearly not planning to hold back his strength at all. Arthur steps forward and unleashes a massive burst of green magical energy from his body. He channels the power into his wooden sword, making it glow bright orange, while Adam readies his own glowing spear. The two clash violently in the middle of the field, creating bright flashes of light in the dark forest. Arthur manages to block Adam's heavy strikes and swing his flaming sword, but Arthur's tiny child body is just too light to handle the sheer physical force of the adult's impact. He gets blown backward and sent flying high into the night sky, dropping his wooden sword in the grass below. The women scream in panic, but Angela quickly casts a glowing green magic sphere to safely catch Arthur and gently lower him to the ground. The rest of the group angrily scolds Adam for going overboard and treating a little kid like a monster. Jasmine quietly approaches Arthur and intensely asks him to teach her how he fights so well. Arthur recognizes her stubborn look and agrees to help her. Over the next few weeks of travel, Arthur trains relentlessly with the group. He does push-ups next to his father, practices firing a bow and arrow with Helen, and runs rapidly through the forest using wind magic to boost his speed. He also spends his evenings sitting by the campfire, reading his heavy magic books, and sharing tactical knowledge from his past life with Jasmine. He shows her how to use a rope attached to the hilt of a dagger for better combat maneuvers. On the day of Arthur's 5th birthday, Jasmine approaches him in a green field and hands him a real high-quality dagger to thank him for all the combat tips he taught her. The rest of the women watch from afar and laugh about how Arthur managed to make the notoriously cold Jasmine warm up to him so easily. Alice watches her son interact with his new friends and starts crying happy tears, completely overwhelmed by how much he has grown. The caravan continues its long journey and eventually travels along a very narrow dirt path at the top of a steep rocky cliff. Arthur sits inside the wagon reading his green book while Alice keeps him company. Suddenly, a volley of sharp arrows rains down from the sky and strikes the ground all around the wagons. The travelers quickly realize they are being completely surrounded by a massive group of masked bandits hiding on the higher cliffs. The bandit leader, a large muscular man with a fur collar and a giant axe, orders his men to attack but commands them to leave the women and the child alive so they can be sold for maximum profit. Angela raises her magical green pendant to illuminate the dark rocky area and expose the hidden enemies. The bandits slide down the steep cliffs with their swords and bows drawn. The Twin Horns and Reinhold immediately engage them in a brutal, chaotic fight. Durden blasts the bandits with his scepter, while Helen snipes them from afar with her arrows. Jasmine and Adam slice through the attackers with ease, dropping bodies all over the path. Despite the party's impressive individual strength, there are simply too many bandits swarming the narrow cliff. Reinhold takes a heavy hit to his shoulder and gets thrown backward into the debris of a shattered wooden cart right in front of Alice and Arthur. The giant bandit leader approaches them with a wicked smile. Reinhold stubbornly stands back up, heavily bleeding from his metal armor, and tells Arthur to take his mother and run away. Arthur refuses to leave and insists he is already strong enough to fight the leader. Reinhold grits his teeth and reveals that Alice is pregnant and going to have another baby, so Arthur must use his strength to protect her instead. Arthur is completely shocked by the sudden news of becoming a big brother. Reinhold turns back to face the giant leader and charges forward, delivering a massive punch charged with glowing pink energy directly to the bandit's face. As the fierce melee continues all around them, Alice grabs Arthur's hand and desperately runs across the dusty mountain path to escape the slaughter. A bandit mage wearing a brown cloak spots them fleeing from a high rocky ledge. He raises his wand and summons a massive swirling vortex of green wind magic directly at the cliffside. The powerful tornado strikes the ground right under Alice and Arthur, violently throwing them backward into the air. Alice manages to grab Arthur to shield him from the blast, but the sheer force pushes them straight off the edge of the massive rocky cliff. As they plummet toward the dense green forest far below, Arthur makes a split-second decision. He realizes he cannot save both of them from the fatal drop. He quickly pulls out the new dagger Jasmine gave him, which is attached to a thin wire. He throws the dagger to anchor it onto the cliff, and uses the wire to violently swing Alice back toward the safety of the rocky ledge. The extreme momentum throws Arthur completely off the wire, sending him plummeting deep into the abyss completely alone. As he falls through the air, he finally understands the complex emotions of the man from his past life. He realizes that sacrificing his own life to save his mother and his unborn sibling brings him a profound sense of fulfillment mixed with deep sorrow. He tightly shuts his eyes and sheds a single tear, genuinely regretting that he will never get the chance to be a big brother. He loses consciousness during the long fall, and sometime later, Arthur slowly wakes up in an unknown location as a mysterious voice cheerfully wishes him a good morning. Arthur opens his eyes to find himself lying at the bottom of a massive dark rocky cavern. He is completely bewildered as to how he survived the long fall from the cliff. Before he can fully process his surroundings, a terrifying voice echoes through the cave. He looks up to see a colossal dark-armored demon with large horns and glowing red eyes looming over him. Thinking he is in grave danger, Arthur immediately jumps to his feet. He attempts to throw a punch at the monstrous creature, but he slips on the rocky floor and falls flat on his face. The demon effortlessly catches his attention and tells him that he still has a lot to learn. It quickly assures him that it is actually on his side. Arthur struggles to comprehend why a terrifying monster would want to help him. The beast ignores his confusion and simply plucks a glowing yellow fruit from a nearby vine. It drops a pile of the strange fruits right in front of him. The demon insists that Arthur needs to eat to recover his strength. It firmly states that he will not get any answers until he finishes his meal. Hesitantly, Arthur picks up one of the glowing fruits and takes a bite. He immediately bursts into tears because the taste is absolutely atrocious. Despite the awful flavor, he forces himself to chew and swallow the food. Miraculously, his terrible wounds begin to heal right away. Watching him eat, the demon notes his hearty appetite and finally decides to share some vital information. The creature reveals that it cannot physically leave the cave. However, it possesses the magical ability to see far beyond the cavern walls. It informs Arthur that his parents survived the brutal bandit attack and safely continued their journey days ago. Overwhelmed with immense relief, Arthur breaks down crying again. This time he cries out of pure happiness and sincerely thanks the monstrous being for the incredible news. The creature then formally introduces herself as Sylvia. Over the next few weeks, Arthur slowly recovers from his injuries while living in the dark cavern alongside Sylvia. He desperately wants to return to his family as soon as possible. Sylvia explains that they are currently located at the very edge of the Elshire forest. She warns him that it is an incredibly dangerous region swarming with wild beasts and ruthless outlaws. She mentions that she has a way to get him out safely by creating a magical tear in space. However, the complex process requires a significant amount of preparation and time. While waiting, Arthur keeps himself busy by constantly practicing his physical combat forms. He uses a simple wooden stick he finds on the cave floor as a makeshift sword. Despite her terrifying demonic appearance, Sylvia proves to be incredibly warm and kind. She watches over him like a guardian while he trains and rests peacefully nearby when he eats his rations. During one of his intense meditation sessions, Arthur focuses his energy and begins to radiate a brilliant yellow light from his body. This incredible display completely shocks Sylvia. She is amazed to discover that he has already formed a mana core at such a young age. Impressed by his innate talent, Sylvia decides to test his limits and demonstrates a high-level magic technique. She raises her large clawed hand and manifests a swirling multicolored orb of light. She effortlessly uses magic while simultaneously gathering fresh mana from the surrounding atmosphere. Arthur immediately recognizes the concept and compares it to refueling a flying airplane in mid-air. He admits he had no idea such a feat was even possible with magic. Sylvia explains that human mages typically separate the steps of gathering and casting mana due to their rigid preconceptions. Wild mana beasts, however, perform the dual action as naturally as breathing. She asks Arthur if he wants to learn this advanced technique. She promises that mastering it will make him significantly more powerful. Before starting the lesson, she demands to know what he intends to do with that newfound strength. Arthur thinks back to the brutal bandit ambush and the helplessness he felt when his family was threatened. Filled with lingering anger, he firmly declares that he wants to gain enough power to utterly destroy anyone who tries to take away the things he cares about. The moment the words leave his mouth, Sylvia suddenly strikes him on the head. She knocks him flat onto the cold cave floor. She flatly rejects his answer and states that she refuses to teach her techniques to someone consumed by vengeance. Arthur argues back. He insists that killing enemies is exactly how he became the strongest king in his past life. Sylvia responds by gently stroking his reddish-brown hair with her massive claws. She proves that her powerful hands can easily tear him to shreds, but can also offer warmth and comfort. She explains that rage and hatred are easy emotions to indulge in, because violence feels good in the heat of the moment. Ultimately, holding on to that hate only leaves a person completely hollow. She begs him not to waste his second chance at life on mindless revenge. She clearly hints that she somehow knows all about his past life as King Grey. Sylvia then asks him the exact same question again and urges him to reconsider his path. This time, Arthur closes his eyes and pictures his loving parents. He remembers the cheerful Twinhorns' adventuring party and all the warm memories they created together around the campfire. With a clear mind and a calm heart, he looks up at Sylvia. He tells her that he wants to become strong solely to protect the people he loves. Sylvia praises him and calls it the perfect answer. Her expression suddenly shifts to one of deep concern as she senses a dangerous presence approaching their hidden location. Meanwhile, deep within Arthur's memories of his past life, King Grey walks down a pristine white hallway. He enters a modern office to meet with an elderly man named Marlin. Marlin enthusiastically greets the king. He praises Grey's unmatched combat skills and the endless wealth his constant military victories have brought to their dying nation. However, Grey feels absolutely nothing but emptiness regarding his violent accomplishments. He recognizes that he is treated as a mere killing machine by the ruling parliament. Tired of the endless bloodshed, Grey coldly informs Marlin that he is completely done with his role as the executor of war. He simply walks away and leaves behind his shattered white mask and blood-stained sword. Back in the present, Arthur diligently practices Sylvia's advanced mana technique in the rocky cavern. He remembers his grueling past life battles where he had to master the control of his internal ki to defeat massive monsters. Drawing on that past combat experience, Arthur successfully synchronizes his internal mana flow with the external atmospheric mana. His small body erupts in a blinding multicolored aura of immense power. Sylvia watches him achieve the incredible feat in such a short amount of time. She sincerely congratulates him on his success. However, their peaceful training session is abruptly cut short. A massive dark-armored figure with long hair and glowing blue eyes suddenly drops into the cavern. The sinister intruder reveals that it managed to track Sylvia down by following the scent of her blood. The demonic enemy demands that Sylvia surrender and come along quietly. She immediately refuses the order. Realizing that a violent confrontation is completely unavoidable, the dark entity gathers a massive sphere of swirling purple energy in its hand. Sylvia steps directly in front of Arthur to shield him from the impending blast. She confidently tells the frightened boy not to worry. The enemy mocks her for choosing to fight. Sylvia ignores the taunts and unleashes a massive blinding vortex of teal and blue energy that completely engulfs her own body. The dark cavern is instantly flooded with a radiant, piercing light. The intense brightness forces Arthur to shield his eyes. When the brilliant flash finally fades, Sylvia's terrifying dark demonic shell is completely gone. In its place stands her true form. She is a breathtakingly majestic white dragon with large curved horns, flowing white hair, vibrant purple eyes, and glowing golden markings across her pristine scales. Without a moment of hesitation, the magnificent dragon opens her jaws. She fires a colossal beam of pure destructive blue energy directly at the dark intruder. The sheer force of the concentrated blast triggers a massive explosion. The attack completely engulfs the enemy and violently shakes the entire underground cavern. As the smoke and debris clear, the dark entity barely survives the devastating strike. It angrily warns Sylvia that utilizing such a lethal level of power will drastically shorten whatever little lifespan she has left. Sylvia calmly replies that she does not mind the severe consequence. She admits she has been genuinely happy spending her recent days with Arthur. She also confesses that she wishes their peaceful time together could have lasted just a bit longer. The enemy launches a desperate counterattack. It hurls a massive orb of dark purple energy directly at the glowing white dragon. The attack connects and causes another massive explosion that momentarily obscures the cavern in thick smoke. When the dust finally settles, Sylvia remains standing tall and completely unharmed. She turns her majestic head to look directly at the terrified boy hiding behind the rocks. She playfully asks Arthur if she looks more like a proper Sylvia now that her disguise is gone. He stares in absolute awe and finally realizes that his kind teacher is actually a legendary dragon. Sylvia explains that dragons are simply what humans call her kind. She quickly drops the light-hearted tone and urges him to hurry. She turns her large body toward a swirling, multicolored portal that has suddenly materialized at the edge of the cavern. She admits that the escape route is not as close to his home as she originally hoped. However, she reassures him that she has taught him everything he needs to survive the wilderness. Before sending him through the dimensional tier, she asks him one final time what he intends to use his immense power for. Arthur firmly repeats his vow to protect the people he cares about. Sylvia smiles softly and declares his answer a binding promise between them. She then tells Arthur that she has a few parting gifts for him. A glowing, multicolored egg-like orb slowly emerges from her chest. It is gently wrapped in one of her pristine white feathers and floats directly into Arthur's small hand. She instructs him to take excellent care of the mysterious object. Next, a glowing orange magical crest suddenly manifests on Arthur's hand. It rapidly spreads up his arm and burns itself directly into his skin. Arthur asks what the strange mark is. Sylvia vaguely replies that he will figure it out in due time. She then solemnly announces that it is officially time for them to say their final goodbyes. Arthur is completely devastated by the sudden departure. Sylvia confesses that she could have easily sent him back to his parents on the very first day. She selfishly chose to keep him in the cave because she genuinely enjoyed living with him. Realizing that Sylvia plans to stay behind to fight the dangerous intruder alone, Arthur desperately begs her to come with him through the portal. He cries out that he does not care if she is a dragon or a monster. He insists that she is his family and he loves her deeply. Sylvia gently points out that he already has a loving mother waiting for him. Arthur tearfully declares that she can be his grandma instead. The sweet sentiment breaks through Sylvia's calm exterior. A single tear falls from her large purple eye, and she sincerely thanks the young boy for his love. Without giving him any more time to argue, she pushes him directly toward the swirling cosmic portal. As Arthur drifts helplessly through the vibrant, multicolored void, the portal behind him begins to close. In those final fleeting moments, he catches a horrifying glimpse of the dark armored enemy returning to the cavern. The intruder launches a massive blast of pink energy directly at Sylvia. Arthur screams her name in pure agony. He fully realizes that she sacrificed her own life just to ensure his escape. As he floats through the endless magical expanse, Sylvia's gentle voice echoes directly into his mind one last time. She reminds him of their promise and begs him not to let his heart fill with hatred or rage over her death. In a final, heartbreaking farewell, she addresses him by his past life's title. She sincerely wishes that King Grey's new life will be completely filled with warmth and light. The cosmic void eventually fades away, and Arthur slowly wakes up. He finds himself lying on a patch of soft green grass under a bright blue sky. He looks around and realizes he has been safely transported to a lush forest clearing far away from the dark cavern. He looks down at his hands and sees the glowing white feather tightly wrapped around the mysterious egg Sylvia gave him. With tears still streaming down his face, Arthur tightly grips the precious gift. He quietly promises to honor his grandmother's final wish as he prepares to face whatever dangers lie ahead in the dense woods. Arthur stands in the lush forest and senses people nearby. He channels magic into his feet to enhance his speed and sprints through the dense trees. He tracks the presence to a clearing and hides on a massive tree branch to observe the situation below. He sees a group of armed bandits gathered around a horse-drawn carriage. They are holding a young silver-haired elf girl named Tessia captive. The bandit boss covers her mouth to stop her from crying out for help. The bandits discuss their plan to sell Tessia as a slave because elf girls fetch a high price. They plan to leave the forest soon. The bandits also mention keeping the other women and children in the caravan alive since dead captives are worth less money. Arthur watches them throw Tessia roughly into a dark storage room inside the wagon. He feels a surge of anger. He then remembers Sylvia's warning about letting negative emotions control him. He decides to suppress his rage and plans to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Arthur follows the bandit caravan until the sun sets. The bandits set up camp for the night. They light a fire and tether their 3 large antlered wolves. Arthur waits in the shadows of the dark forest. The bandit boss jokes about having some fun with Tessia before selling her. He decides against it because damaged goods sell for less. Arthur sits in a meditative pose on a tree branch and prepares his strategy. He figures the antlered wolves are controlled by magic and decides to use that to his advantage. He throws several small, hard seeds through the dark trees. The seeds hit the wolves and cause them to panic. The three beasts start howling loudly into the night. The noise quickly irritates the bandits around the campfire. One muscular bandit in a red outfit walks over and kicks the wolves to shut them up. He complains that the noise will attract wild monsters. Arthur silently drops down from the trees. The muscular bandit wanders slightly away from the camp to relieve himself. Arthur sneaks up behind him and quickly takes him down in the mist. He grabs the bandit's knife to use as a weapon. Back at the camp, a portly bandit in a purple coat notices his friend has been gone too long. He walks into the dark forest to check on him. Arthur silently drops onto the portly bandit's shoulders from the trees above. He holds the stolen knife to his throat and quickly eliminates his second target. Arthur grabs a glowing blue sword from the fallen enemies. A third bald bandit comes to investigate the commotion. Arthur lunges out of the thick green mist and slashes him from behind. The bald bandit falls to the ground in pain and screams for his boss. He warns him that the attacker is a young mage. The bandit boss emerges from a tent holding a large curved knife. He is surprised to see a child taking out his men. The boss figures Arthur will sell for an even higher price than the elf girl and decides to capture him alive. He unleashes a massive blast of red fire magic from his hands. Arthur easily dodges the initial attack. The boss charges forward and unleashes an even larger blast of red energy that shatters the ground. Arthur gets thrown backward by the explosion but lands safely on his feet. The boss gets angry and throws Arthur violently toward a large rock. Arthur recovers quickly in midair and lunges back at the tall man with his knife. They engage in a fierce close-quarters struggle. Arthur skids across the rocky ground and pulls a thin wire taut between the trees to create a trap. The boss notices the wire and mocks Arthur's tricks. He kicks Arthur hard in the chest. This sends Arthur rolling down a grassy slope. The boss demands that Arthur surrender, but Arthur refuses. Arthur waits for the boss to step closer and then channels his mana. He condenses a powerful blast of fire magic directly at the boss's feet. The explosion engulfs the boss in flames. The boss stumbles backward and clutches his severely burned face and hands. Enraged by the pain, the boss decides to abandon capturing Arthur alive. He throws his curved knife directly at Arthur's head. He hopes to kill him and sell his corpse to collectors. Arthur easily dodges the flying blade. He instantly retaliates by throwing his own knife with deadly precision. The blade buries itself deep into the boss's forehead and kills him instantly. Arthur then walks over to the injured bald bandit. The man begs for his life. Arthur coldly remarks that Tessia likely begged for her life too. He kills the final bandit without hesitation. Arthur heads to the storage wagon and finds Tessia huddled in the dark among the crates. She is blindfolded and terrified. Arthur removes her blindfold and gently tells her she is safe. Tessia notices a few minor scratches on Arthur's arms and asks if he is hurt. Arthur is surprised by her concern. Tessia admits it is her first time being around another child her own age. Arthur helps her out of the wagon. They bury the dead bandits and create small memorials for them. Tessia asks what happened to the men who kidnapped her. Arthur lies and tells her they had an unfortunate accident. He then grabs a large backpack filled with supplies and tells Tessia it is safe for her to go home now. He turns to leave so he can find his own family. Tessia panics and tightly grabs his shirt. She cries hysterically and begs him not to leave her alone in the woods. She explains that she got lost while chasing bugs and has no idea which way her home is. She is also terrified that forest golems will eat her. Arthur realizes he cannot just abandon her in the dangerous forest. He agrees to escort her home. Before they leave, they discuss the captive antlered wolves. Arthur suggests putting them out of their misery so they do not starve. Tessia completely rejects the idea and insists on setting them free instead. She believes the beasts were just forced to do bad things by the bandits. Arthur agrees and they remove the wolves' heavy leather harnesses. The beasts run off into the woods. Arthur and Tessia begin their journey through the lush forest. They walk along a rocky cliffside, and Tessia officially introduces herself. Arthur gives her his name in return. As night falls, they set up camp by a small fire. Arthur cooks a simple meal of boiled jerky and salt in a wooden bowl. He remembers Sylvia forcing him to eat terrible food in the cave, and tells Tessia she needs to eat to keep her strength up. Tessia takes a bite and makes a disgusted face. She complains that it tastes funny and wishes she had something sweet. Arthur notes her typical childlike behavior and treats food purely as fuel. They sit together and discuss Tessia's home in Elenoir. She explains that her parents are very busy, so she spends most of her time with her grandfather. During their walk the next day, Tessia shows Arthur small glowing bugs that the elves use to mark paths. Arthur thinks they look like glowing earrings. Tessia talks excitedly about beginning her magic training with a dedicated master once her mana awakens. Arthur finds the elven education system interesting. That night, they pitch a small tent among the massive tree roots. Arthur tells Tessia to go inside while he stays outside to keep watch. Tessia feels scared and tries to convince him to come inside. She argues that beasts will spot him easily if he stays out in the open. Arthur calls her bluff and asks if she is just scared of ghosts. Tessia vehemently denies it. She then uses a different tactic. She claims her grandfather warned her that human men are perverts who take multiple wives. She says she is not supposed to sleep near men. Arthur defends himself and points out that only a few human aristocrats have multiple wives. He eventually gives in and joins her inside the tent to make her feel safe. Tessia falls asleep quickly. Arthur watches her sleep and wonders if this is what having a little sister feels like. Before falling asleep, Tessia briefly mentions the bedtime stories she hears about the human and dwarf kingdoms. She explains that the stories feature bad people, which is why elves generally do not trust outsiders. The next morning, they continue their trek. They carefully climb a steep, icy cliff right beside a massive waterfall. Tessia successfully reaches the top and smiles brightly. Arthur follows behind with his heavy backpack. Suddenly, Arthur experiences an excruciating burst of pain radiating directly from his mana core. He drops to his knees on the dirt path and clutches his chest in agony. Tessia rushes to his side and asks if he is okay. Arthur tries to brush it off and claims he is fine. However, the pain continues to worsen, and the attacks happen more frequently. He collapses against a mossy tree trunk, completely exhausted. He decides not to tell Tessia the truth about his condition, because he does not want to worry her. Suddenly, a massive gray wolf steps out of the bushes. It is one of the beasts they freed from the bandit camp. The wolf drops a large dead boar in front of them and walks away. Tessia happily assumes the beast is repaying them for their kindness. That evening, Arthur roasts the boar on skewers over the campfire. Tessia eats eagerly and praises the tender meat. She also shares some nutritious mushrooms she found in the forest. She claims elf women eat them all the time. After the meal, the immense pain and exhaustion finally overwhelm Arthur. He passes out on the floor of the dark tent. Tessia covers him with her cloak and realizes she has to step up and act like an adult. She packs their gear and carries the unconscious Arthur on her back through the misty forest. Arthur eventually wakes up and feels terrible for making her carry him. He apologizes for being weak. Tessia tells him it is fine and mentions they are getting close to her home. She asks if they are close enough friends for him to just call her Art. Arthur immediately starts teasing her. He formally calls her Your Highness Tessia to annoy her. Tessia gets angry and calls him a crybaby who needs an escort to the bathroom. They bicker playfully as they walk. Soon they arrive at the base of a massive tree. A brilliant green portal of light suddenly opens among the roots. Tessia happily announces that they have finally arrived. She steps directly into the glowing light and tells Arthur to follow her. Arthur looks extremely surprised but steps into the green portal right behind her. Meanwhile, a mysterious voice telepathically notes that a teleportation gate has just been activated. As soon as Arthur and Tessia step through the portal, they find themselves in a stone-paved courtyard surrounded by elven soldiers. The guards immediately spot Arthur and view him as a massive threat because he is a human trespassing on their hidden lands. Two soldiers forcefully grab Tessia by her shoulders to pull her away from him, while another guard points a sharp sword directly at Arthur. Arthur realizes that he let his guard down simply because Tessia is so innocent and friendly. He remembers how she asked him to call her Art just like a close friend, and how that simple gesture made him trust her completely. Now he regrets that decision as the soldiers demand his immediate execution. Tessia frantically yells at the guards to stop and explains that Arthur actually saved her life. The guards refuse to listen and accuse Arthur of being a violent savage who clearly brainwashed the young girl. Just as the soldiers prepare to strike, a brilliant green energy orb materializes on the stone floor. An elderly elf steps out of the light and firmly orders the guards to release the human boy at once. The guards instantly comply out of deep respect. Tessia happily calls the elderly man grandpa and complains about the guards being mean to her savior. The man points out that bringing a human savage into their kingdom naturally caused a panic. He then introduces himself to Arthur as Virion Erelith, the former ruler of the Elenoir kingdom. He sincerely thanks Arthur for protecting his granddaughter. Arthur is completely shocked to learn that his annoying little traveling companion is actually the princess of the elves. He thinks back to their journey and realizes that absolutely nothing about her behavior suggested she possessed royal blood. Moments later, an ornate carriage arrives, and King Alduin and Queen Mariel rush over to their daughter. Tessia runs into her mother's arms, crying about how much she missed them. Arthur watches the emotional reunion and processes the fact that he is standing right in front of the current king and queen of the Elven territory. Alduin suddenly notices Arthur and angrily demands to know why a human is standing in their courtyard. He orders his guards to arrest the boy immediately. Virion calmly intervenes and explains that Arthur safely escorted Tessia back home, so executing him would be a terrible mistake. Tessia furiously defends Arthur and insists that they must invite him into the castle as an honored guest. Alduin is completely appalled at the idea of allowing a human inside his royal home. Tessia ignores her father's hesitation and excitedly promises to share all her favorite treats with Arthur. The king eventually caves to his daughter's demands with a heavy sigh. Virion gives Arthur a very stern look and promises that they will have a serious discussion later. Arthur feels an overwhelming and unfathomable strength radiating from the old man. Tessia grabs Arthur by the hand and excitedly drags him through the beautiful elven city. They pass by bustling marketplaces and massive suspension bridges, connecting white dome-shaped houses built right into the mountain cliffs. Arthur notes that the architecture perfectly matches the books he read in his past life. He also notices the hostile glares from the local elves passing by on the street. He understands that the long history of conflict between humans and elves makes his presence here highly controversial. Suddenly, Arthur clutches his chest as a sharp pain violently surges through his body again. He thinks about the strange expression Tessia made earlier when the guards attacked him and resolves to stay completely alert so he never gets caught off guard again. They finally arrive at the Grand Royal Castle, where a large group of maids eagerly welcomes the princess back home. Tessia excitedly suggests taking a bath and playing games, but her parents insist on having a formal meeting first to understand exactly what happened to her. The group moves into a lavish meeting room and sits down at a long wooden table filled with tea and sweet pastries. Arthur kneels respectfully on the floor while Tessia, Alduin, Mariel, and Virion take their seats. Arthur formally introduces himself as Arthur Lewin from a humble town in the Sapin Kingdom and expresses his deep gratitude for the audience. Alduin notes that Arthur is surprisingly well-spoken for a low-born human child. Arthur deliberately uses polite manners because he knows the elves will not take him seriously if he acts like a normal kid. Alduin demands a full explanation of the events. Arthur recounts his story, carefully omitting certain secrets about his magical abilities and past life, while sticking to the basic facts. When he mentions that slavers kidnapped Tessia, the atmosphere in the room instantly turns completely hostile. Alduin slams his fist on the table in pure rage and assumes that human barbarians crossed the border to steal his daughter. Arthur politely corrects the king and points out that slave trafficking is a criminal profession that spans all races, not just humans. Virion questions how a mere child managed to defeat a group of armed slavers. Arthur plainly states that he is a sorcerer and used his magic to overpower the bandits. The royal guards in the room immediately draw their swords and accuse Arthur of spouting absolute nonsense. They suggest that Arthur simply manipulated Tessia in the woods to infiltrate their kingdom as a spy. Virion sternly commands the guards to lower their weapons and stop making baseless accusations. Tessia fiercely backs up Arthur's story, confirming that the bad men definitely talked about selling her off for a high price. The royal family realizes she is telling the truth, and the tension in the room finally dissipates. Alduin formally thanks Arthur for his brave actions and asks what kind of reward he desires. Arthur states that his only wish is to safely return to his family in the Sapin Kingdom. Alduin gets highly offended by the request. He points out the deep hatred between their races and questions why Arthur thinks the elves would go out of their way to escort a human across the continent. Arthur boldly counters the king's argument. He states that if the elves truly consider humans to be lowly savages, then the royal family should easily be able to act with superior grace and honor their debts without stooping to a debased level. Varian chuckles and admits that the human boy makes an incredibly solid point. Alduin sighs in frustration and explains that the teleportation gate connecting their kingdom to Sapin is strictly reserved for the Grand Council of Rulers. He reveals that the gate only opens once every 7 years, and the next meeting is not scheduled for another 5 years. Arthur feels his heart sink because waiting 5 years is completely out of the question. Alduin adds that they obviously cannot let a human reside in the elven capital for that long anyway. He promises to arrange for a squad of soldiers to escort Arthur back to the human border first thing in the morning. Arthur feels a massive wave of relief wash over him as he realizes he can finally go home to his parents. He thanks the king profusely. Suddenly, Arthur clutches his chest again as another intense spike of pain wreaks havoc on his body. Alduin dismisses him and tells him to rest for the night. Later that evening, Arthur stands shirtless under a powerful waterfall in the royal gardens trying to soothe his aching body. He wonders what is causing these constant agonizing attacks and desperately asks Sylvia for guidance. He realizes he cannot ignore the problem any longer and needs to find a real solution. After finishing his training, Arthur stands on a dark balcony built into the cliffside to enjoy the cool night breeze. He looks up and spots Tessia happily holding hands with her parents on a higher platform. He wonders if his own parents managed to survive the bandit ambush that separated them in the first place. He feels confident that Reynolds and Alice fought their way to safety, but he still misses them terribly. Watching Tessia's happy family makes Arthur doubt his own self-worth. He wonders if his parents would even smile at him like that if they reunited. He feels incredibly guilty for being so weak and failing to protect them during the attack. Just then, Tessia spots Arthur sulking in the dark stone walkway and runs over to check on him. She apologizes profusely for how horribly her father and the guards treated him earlier. Arthur brushes off the apology and tells her that their reaction just proves how much they genuinely love and worry about her. He advises her to stop worrying about him and just enjoy being a spoiled princess with her family. Tessia gets slightly annoyed and claims that Arthur is just making fun of her. She bets that he will act exactly the same way when he finally sees his own parents. Arthur leans against a white pillar and honestly admits that he doubts his family will be happy to see him. He explains that his parents suffered through a brutal bandit attack specifically because of him, and he feels entirely responsible for their pain. He calls himself a massive failure for being incapable of protecting the people he loves. Tessia feels awful hearing his confession and playfully squishes his cheeks to snap him out of his depression. She firmly declares that his parents are obviously devastated by his absence and definitely miss him more than anything. She admits that she is already super sad about him leaving tomorrow morning even though he hasn't actually left yet. Her kind words instantly comfort Arthur. They walk over to the railing and look out over the beautiful dark cavern. Thousands of glowing green orbs float gracefully through the air like magical fireflies. Tessia explains that the beautiful lights are called firefly pots. Arthur looks at the floating lights and sees translucent illusions of his mother and father smiling warmly at him. He realizes that his internal war with his past life's dark memories is completely foolish and unnecessary. He genuinely apologizes to Tessia for being so gloomy and admits that he really likes the firefly pots too. They stand together in the peaceful grassy field and enjoy the magical scenery. Without any warning, Virion violently lunges out of the shadows and throws a devastating punch straight at Arthur's head. Arthur's combat instincts immediately take over. He drops into a defensive crouch and unleashes a powerful blast of green energy to block the old man's strike. Virion casually laughs and reveals that the entire ambush was just a trick. He wanted to test Arthur's instant defensive responses to prove that the boy really did fight off those armed slavers by himself. Tessia completely loses her temper and screams at her grandfather for trying to kill her best friend. Virion calmly brushes off her anger and states that his attack wouldn't have actually killed anyone. He explains that he hasn't taken this much interest in another person in an extremely long time. He summons a wooden training sword and challenges Arthur to a sparring match right there in the courtyard. Arthur accepts the challenge and grabs his own wooden sword. They clash weapons repeatedly on the stone-paved floor. Arthur pushes his mana to the absolute limit, trying to keep his movements as direct and efficient as possible, but Virion is still impossibly fast. The old man easily dodges every single strike and lands a heavy blow that sends Arthur flying backward across the tiles. Arthur realizes he needs to move even faster if he wants to land a single hit. He charges forward with explosive speed and strikes Virion directly in the chest, but the immense impact instantly shatters Arthur's wooden sword into tiny wooden splinters. Tessia screams and shields her face from the flying debris. With his weapon completely destroyed, Arthur relies on pure instinct. He remembers the desperate look in the eyes of the wild beasts he used to fight in the arena when they prepared their final climactic attacks. He channels a massive surge of fiery red and green magic directly into his fist. He leaps through the air and delivers a devastating magical punch straight into Virion's face. The old man stumbles backward and smirks while rubbing his bruised forehead. He openly admits that he definitely wasn't expecting a child to actually get the better of him. He eagerly prepares to start the second round of their fight, but Tessia violently grabs him from behind and demands that he stop bullying Arthur. Virion complains that Arthur is supposed to hold back during friendly spars, but Tessia argues that Virion would have just crushed him otherwise. Virion tells Arthur that he is incredibly impressed by his raw talent and officially offers to take the boy as his personal apprentice. Arthur is stunned by the sudden offer but politely declines. He explains that his parents still think he is dead, so he cannot afford to stay in the Elven Kingdom for years to train. Virion promises to find a way to secretly send a message to Arthur's family to let them know he is safe as long as Arthur accepts the apprenticeship. Before Arthur can even process the amazing deal, his body violently betrays him again. A horrific wave of pain explodes in his chest, forcing him to his knees on the stone floor. He clutches his shirt and grits his teeth in pure agony as heavy beads of sweat pour down his face. Virion walks over and stares down at the suffering boy with a completely serious expression. The old man states that his suspicions were perfectly correct. He reveals that Arthur has somehow inherited a legendary beast will, and his young human body is failing to process the massive magical power. Virion firmly tells Arthur that he must become his apprentice right now, because if he refuses the training, the uncontrollable beast will is going to completely destroy his body and kill him. The overwhelming pain in his core plunges Arthur into a dark void deep within his own mind. He finds himself lying on the ground, sweating and wincing in extreme distress as a towering entity made of swirling purple and blue mist looms directly over him. The monster features glowing red eyes and a wide, sinister grin. Arthur looks up at the terrifying creature and wonders if it represents his inner anxiety or the crushing weight of his new responsibility. The nightmare suddenly breaks when Tessia wakes him up. She sits right on top of him in his bed, loudly demanding he get up because her grandfather Virion is waiting for them. Arthur groggily asks for 5 more minutes and jokingly calls her a monster. Tessia gets incredibly angry, blushing and yelling at him for calling her that. She hops off the bed and pulls on his arms to drag him up, complaining that his hair is a complete mess. Arthur takes off his shirt to change, and Tessia awkwardly watches him while asking if it is really true that he plans to stay in Elenoir. Arthur admits he is not completely sure yet, but hopes to make a final decision after their upcoming trip. He playfully calls her princess, which immediately sets Tessia off again. She shouts at him to just call her Tess and aggressively threatens to get really mad if he uses her royal title one more time. Arthur smirks and tells her she is already acting like a princess, then asks her to leave the room so he can finish getting dressed. Later, they meet up with King Alduin and Virion near a grand black and gold carriage outside the palace. Alduin aggressively argues with his father, insisting that a human simply does not belong in the Elven Kingdom, and that allowing Arthur to stay goes completely against their ancient traditions. Virion calmly shuts him down, stating that he has simply taken a liking to the boy, and his decision is absolutely final. Tessia chimes in, passionately reminding her father that Arthur saved her life. Alduin tries to dismiss her, but Virion tells them that is enough and orders Arthur and Tessia to get into the carriage. As the carriage travels through the lush forest, Tessia falls fast asleep and rests her head on Arthur's shoulder. Virion looks at the two of them and points out that Arthur seems a bit too relaxed, calling him Grandpa. Arthur smiles and replies that his attitude might change depending on how this trip goes. Virion gets serious and explains exactly why he is willing to help Arthur. He reveals that Tessia woke up very early, desperate to find out what would happen to Arthur. Virion explains that as the sole heir to the throne, Tessia has lived a very isolated and lonely life. She has had her heart broken by superficial friends who only cared about her royal status, causing her to build up thick emotional walls. But Virion notices that when she is around Arthur, she smiles naturally, showing a genuine happiness he has not seen in a long time. Virion sincerely thanks Arthur for bringing that joy back to his granddaughter. Arthur realizes that Virion is willing to swallow his pride and thank a human child because he genuinely cares for Tessia, making Arthur decide that Virion is a man he can fully trust. Tessia eventually wakes up, rubbing her eyes and asking if they have arrived. The carriage pulls up to a rustic stone house built into a hillside. Virion steps up to the wooden door and starts kicking it, shouting at the resident to open up. An elderly gray-haired elf woman named Rhynia angrily slides the door open and yells back at Virion for making so much noise. Virion introduces Rhynia as an old friend and a sorcerer with unique diviner skills. Arthur realizes her magic must fall outside the standard 4 elements, similar to his mother Alice's healing abilities. Rhynia warmly invites them inside her home, which is filled with massive wooden bookshelves and strange magical items. They all gather around a wooden table, holding a large basin of water. Arthur respectfully asks Rhynia how she plans to help him contact his parents. Rhynia explains that as a diviner, she can see pieces of the past and future, but she knows Arthur is a special child with a hidden nature even she cannot fully perceive. She guesses correctly that he just wants to let his parents know he is safe. Rhynia activates her magic, causing the water in the basin to glow bright green. She instructs Arthur to focus his mind and picture his parents in as much detail as possible so he can speak to them. Arthur closes his eyes and pictures his mother Alice with her chestnut hair and gentle nature, and his father Reynolds with his piercing blue eyes and strong charisma. The magic basin establishes a connection, revealing a vision of Alice and Reynolds sitting in their home. They look completely devastated. It happens to be Arthur's birthday, and they have prepared his favorite stew, but neither of them can eat. The vision briefly flashes back to the terrible day Arthur fell off the cliff. Alice screams in absolute agony on the grassy ridge while being restrained by her party members. Reynolds kneels on the ground in total despair before getting violently punched in the face by their comrade Adam, who angrily blames Reynolds for failing to protect his own son. After the tragic loss, the grieving parents traveled back to their hometown and have been living in deep sorrow ever since, blaming themselves entirely for Arthur's apparent death. Arthur's voice suddenly echoes in their dining room. Alice and Reynolds look up in absolute shock. A glowing green magical barrier completely surrounds them, projecting Arthur's message. He quickly tells them that he is alive and currently staying with the elves in the kingdom of Elenoir. He explains that there is something wrong with his body that requires special treatment, but assures them it is nothing too serious, and he will come back home as soon as he recovers. He begs them to stop blaming themselves, stating he would have made the exact same sacrifice to save them even if it meant his death. Alice and Reynolds burst into tears of pure joy, overwhelmed with relief to hear their son's voice. They share a deeply emotional moment, and Arthur tells them how much he loves them before the magical connection fades. Back in Rhynia's home, Arthur cries silently, incredibly grateful to know his parents are safe. With his mind fully made up, he wipes his tears, turns to Virion, and formally asks the former king to take him as his apprentice. Virion completely accepts. The next day at the Elven Palace, Tessia angrily confronts King Alduin, demanding they treat Arthur with the respect he deserves for saving her life multiple times. She argues that if they chase Arthur away, the rest of the world will think elves are horribly ungrateful. Alduin looks deeply conflicted but ultimately agrees to let Arthur stay under Virion's direct tutelage. Later in the Grand Hall, Alduin approaches Arthur and formally apologizes for his previous hostility. He admits that sitting on the throne has made him stubborn and officially welcomes Arthur to their home. Queen Mariel also smiles and tells Arthur to treat the palace as his own. Arthur realizes Alduin simply cannot stand up to his father Virion and is incredibly soft on his daughter Tessia. Tessia immediately ruins the formal atmosphere by demanding they go outside to play. She grabs Arthur's hand and eagerly gives him a tour of the elven capital. They run through the crowded outdoor marketplace, passing various stalls selling fruits and meats. Tessia happily points out a popular sweets bazaar, and they rush over. Along the way, Arthur accidentally bumps into a blonde elf boy. The boy instantly sneers at Arthur in absolute disgust, complaining about getting human germs on him. The boy proudly introduces himself as Faerith Ivsar, a member of the elven nobility. Faerith loudly mocks Arthur, calling him a monkey and demanding he go back to his own kind, drawing a large crowd of curious onlookers. Tessia gets extremely annoyed and tells Arthur to ignore the predictable pest. Arthur simply smirks, deciding to have a little fun with the situation. He uses heavy sarcasm to mock Faerith, pretending to be absolutely awestruck by his noble presence and bowing in exaggerated respect while promising to show him the proper reverence from now on. Tessia giggles uncontrollably as Arthur continues to embarrass the arrogant noble. Faerith completely fails to grasp the sarcasm at first, but when he finally realizes he is being mocked by a human, he flies into a blind rage. Desperate to defend his family's honor, Faerith pulls out his purple wand and officially challenges Arthur to a duel. He demands Arthur accept or run away like a coward. Arthur casually accepts the challenge, and Tessia agrees to officiate the match. A large crowd of elves gathers around them in the marketplace clearing. Faerith boasts confidently and launches a barrage of magical energy arrows at Arthur. However, Arthur does not even flinch. He easily dodges the magical blasts, closes the distance in a split second, and delivers a single devastating punch straight to Faerith's face. The massive impact sends the blonde elf flying through the air. Faerith crashes onto the cobblestone path, completely defeated and crying from the pain. Arthur stands over him, casually wondering if he hit the boy too hard. Tessia runs up, grabs Arthur's hand, and they flee the scene together, laughing joyfully while leaving the humiliated noble crying on the ground. Arthur and Tessia spend the rest of the day thoroughly enjoying themselves. They eat snacks in the market, read books together in a cozy library, and explore weapon shops. As the sun sets, they stand on a balcony overlooking the beautiful forest village. Arthur mentions that his rigorous training starts the next day. He thinks back to Virian's strict warning that beast tamer training is pure agony, often compared to being dipped into boiling pitch. Despite the terrifying warning, Arthur feels nothing but sheer excitement. He enthusiastically punches the air, happy to finally take control of his own future and gain the tremendous strength he needs to survive. Inspired by his burning determination, Tessia vows to work just as hard so she can stand as an equal by his side. 3 full years pass. Arthur undergoes grueling daily training with Virian deep within the multi-leveled forest canyon. He constantly pushes his body to the absolute limit, enduring the intense pain of his mana core while trying to master his immense draconic power. He spars relentlessly with Virian using wooden practice swords amidst the ancient stone pillars, completely determined to overcome every obstacle in his path. During one intense session, they dash past each other with incredible speed, trading heavy blows. Arthur realizes that his journey in this new world has been full of difficult trials, but he focuses entirely on the present moment, knowing the future holds even greater challenges. After another exhausting day of training, an older Tessia tries to wake Arthur up from a deep slumber. She complains loudly that he actually used his mana to put himself to sleep so he could ignore her entirely, showing how incredibly close they have become over the years of living together. Later that morning, Arthur and Tessia stand on an arched balcony and watch a golden carriage being pulled by a creature through the courtyard. Tessia wonders where the carriage is heading. Arthur guesses that King Alduin and Queen Mariel are leaving for some sort of official meeting that requires their mandatory attendance. Moving on from the distraction, Tessia presents Arthur with a massive hamburger she prepared just for him. She demands that he eat the entire thing and tells him he should be incredibly grateful, considering how beautiful the girl who made it is. Arthur takes a huge bite with his cheeks puffed out and jokingly questions her claim about being beautiful, which immediately flusters Tessia and makes her yell at him. After breakfast, the two of them head out into the dense green forest to train with Virian. Arthur and Tessia start with a physical sparring session, chasing each other around the clearing while Virian observes calmly from the sideline. Tessia throws energetic kicks and swings at Arthur, clearly trying to get payback for his teasing earlier. Virian eventually interrupts them, stating that their warm-up is over since they are both moving too slow. He tosses them actual wooden practice swords and announces the beginning of their real training. After an exhausting session, Tessia collapses on the grass, while Virion sits nearby reading a book. Virion decides to review the fundamentals of sorcery with them. He explains that once a mage stabilizes their mana, they can master one of the 4 main elements. These elements are fire, water, wind, and earth. He notes that elemental inclination heavily depends on a person's race. Elves naturally specialize in wind, water, and earth, while dwarves are strongly attuned to earth and fire. Humans have the unique capacity to use all 4 elements, though most human mages still only master one due to personal compatibility. Arthur finds this information fascinating. Tessia raises her hand and asks Virion why Arthur has not been using any sorcery during his physical training like she does. Virion explains that Arthur currently has a severe weakness. An incredibly powerful beast will is slumbering deep inside Arthur's mana core. This foreign presence is constantly upsetting the delicate balance between his physical body and his mana. Virion notes that this imbalance is the direct cause of the intense pain Arthur occasionally suffers. Because of this, Virion's first step was forcing Arthur to assimilate his mana with his physical body. Tessia teases Arthur, claiming he always acts like her hits hurt so much during sparring. Arthur argues that anyone would feel pain getting hit by her that hard. Virion interrupts their banter and declares that they are finally going to awaken the beast will inside Arthur's core. He assures Arthur that if this procedure works, the mysterious pain will vanish entirely, and Arthur will become a true beast tamer. Arthur excitedly agrees to proceed. Virion instructs Arthur to kneel on the ground and explains that he is going to forcefully ignite his mana core. Tessia asks if this dangerous procedure is actually safe. Virion confidently assures her that Arthur might feel a bit of heat, but he will be perfectly fine. Without any further hesitation, Virion steps forward and strikes Arthur hard in the stomach. He then places his glowing hand directly on Arthur's chest, enveloping the boy in a massive surge of golden magical energy. Arthur immediately screams in absolute agony as the intense golden aura violently erupts around him. The blinding magical explosion completely engulfs the forest, tearing Arthur's shirt to shreds and blasting sharp wooden stakes outward across the ground. Virion is momentarily pushed back by the sheer force of the vertical energy beam. Tessia watches in extreme worry as Arthur's eyes glow solid white from the overwhelming power. When the intense magical blast finally clears, Arthur collapses unconscious onto the grassy ground. Sometime later, Arthur wakes up in a bed inside a room with golden tiled windows. He finds Virion sitting quietly beside him. Virion asks how he is feeling, and then seriously asks if Arthur has any idea where his beast will actually came from. Arthur thinks back to the majestic creature he met, and admits to Virion that Sylvia was a dragon. Virion is completely shocked by this revelation. He covers his face in disbelief, but admits that a dragon's will perfectly explains the overwhelming power he just witnessed. Virion strictly warns Arthur never to tell anyone else about this. Possessing the will of a dragon is guaranteed to draw unwanted and dangerous conflict. Putting the shock aside, Virion delivers some unexpected news. He informs Arthur that his departure from Elenoir is now scheduled for just 4 months from now. This completely surprises Arthur, who thought he had 2 full years left. Virion explains that the 3 kingdoms are organizing a cultural exchange event for young people. During this event, the entrance to the flying city of Xyrus will be opened. Arthur realizes that the king and queen left in the carriage earlier to prepare for this exact event. Virion tells Arthur he should be happy to finally see his family again. Arthur feels a deep sense of melancholy about leaving Tessia and his new life behind. Virion pats Arthur on the head and tells him to rest, warning him that his training is going to get significantly harder starting tomorrow. Arthur asks if Tessia knows about his early departure, and Virion confirms that she is already aware of the situation. That night, Arthur lies awake in his dimly lit room. He stares at the vibrant, multicolored glowing orb Sylvia gave him before she died. He feels anxious about having only 4 months left in the Elven Kingdom. Suddenly, the glowing orb starts forming thin black cracks across its surface. Arthur watches in sheer terror as the cracks expand into a jagged dark void. He realizes in panic that the stone is actually a dragon egg. The orb completely shatters, sending iridescent shards and shimmering particles flying across the room. From the magical debris, a small black creature with bat-like wings, tiny horns, and a star-tipped tail emerges. The creature lands on Arthur's bed, smiling joyfully with its mouth wide open. Arthur looks at the small dragon in absolute wonder. He carefully picks her up, noting how adorable she is. Suddenly, Arthur hears a voice in his head calling out in pain. He drops the creature in surprise. At the exact same moment, a glowing purple magical crest permanently manifests on his arm over a scratchy mark. Arthur realizes the small dragon is communicating with him telepathically. The dragon happily calls him Papa in his mind. Arthur asks her to stop calling him that and decides to name her Sylvie in honor of her mother. Sylvie loves the name and purrs happily. Arthur examines the new magical crest on his arm, realizing it signifies his bond with the dragon. He jokes to himself about becoming a father at 8 years old and falls comfortably asleep with Sylvie resting beside him. The next morning, Tessia peeks through the large wooden doors of Arthur's room and sneaks inside. She pulls back the white sheets and is completely surprised to see Arthur sleeping next to the small black dragon. Arthur wakes up startled. Tessia simply picks up Sylvie and gushes over how incredibly adorable she is. Sylvie yawns playfully, instantly winning Tessia over. Later that day, Arthur walks through the forest with Sylvie comfortably perched on top of his head. Tessia follows closely behind, begging Arthur to let her pet the dragon. They soon meet up with Virion in a clearing. Virion takes one look at the small black creature and immediately recognizes it as a dragon. The shock causes Virion's face to turn pale blue, and he angrily yells at Arthur for giving him a near heart attack. Sylvie jumps down onto the mossy ground, and Tessia happily crouches down to pet her. Virion deduces that the egg must have hatched the moment Arthur fully assimilated the beast will into his core. He advises Arthur to simply tell people that Sylvie is a rare mana beast to avoid any unwanted suspicion. Moving on to business, Virion announces the start of Arthur's actual combat practice. He explains that since Arthur is now a proper beast tamer, he needs to learn how to exercise his beast core and mana core simultaneously. The only effective way to do that is in the middle of a real fight. Suddenly, Virion is enveloped in a dark, swirling green aura. His entire body dissolves into black smoke, leaving Arthur completely shocked and forcing Tessia to cover her face in distress. From the dense smoke, a massive, muscular, shadowy figure with glowing yellow eyes emerges. Arthur cowers in genuine fear as the terrifying monster looms over him. A massive, shadowy claw grips Arthur's shoulder from behind, causing him to sweat profusely. Arthur surrenders almost immediately, admitting the monster's appearance is deeply traumatizing. The shadowy figure shifts back into Virion. He casually notes that Arthur is not the first person to complain about the terrifying look. Arthur praises Virion's incredible speed but points out that he could not sense Virion's presence at all. Virion explains that his Shadow Panther beast will grant him instinctive control over wind magic. It also allows him to completely neutralize sound, which is a highly advanced form of sorcery. However, he admits this technique is extremely exhausting to maintain. Virion hands Arthur a wooden sword and officially begins the grueling physical training. Over the next several days, Arthur works tirelessly to master his newly awakened beast will. Because his mana core is finally stable, the intense pain in his chest completely disappears. His physical body also grows significantly stronger, allowing him to easily withstand the previously unbearable training sessions. During one intense sparring match, Arthur manages to strike Virion's shadowy panther form with a powerful swing of his wooden sword, creating a massive blast of red and orange energy. Outside of his brutal training, Arthur spends his free time enjoying life as a normal kid. He plays tabletop games with Tessia, easily beating her and causing her to cry in frustration. One afternoon, Arthur and Tessia visit a bustling city street decorated with colorful balloons and banners for a festival. While walking through the crowded market, they unexpectedly run into Faerith Ivsar, the arrogant blonde elf noble Arthur humiliated years ago. Faerith immediately recognizes Arthur and angrily accuses him of using unsporting tactics during their last duel. Furious and desperate for revenge, Faerith challenges Arthur to a rematch. However, in his blind anger, Faerith trips over his own feet and falls face first onto the stone path with a dazed expression. Rather than mocking him, Arthur casually reaches out, grabs Faerith by the tunic and pulls him up. Arthur smiles warmly and tells Faerith it is great to see him again. Faerith blushes in embarrassment but officially shakes Arthur's hand, burying their past rivalry. Faerith proudly reveals that he has been chosen as a mandatory goodwill ambassador for the upcoming cultural exchange in the human kingdom. He asks if Tessia is planning to attend as well. Tessia immediately looks down with a deeply saddened expression, knowing her parents will not allow her to go. Faerith completely misreads the room and jokingly suggests the royal family probably doesn't want their delicate princess getting lost again. The word delicate triggers Tessia's immense frustration. She silently steps up to Faerith and delivers a devastating punch that sends the blonde elf and her own pink hat flying high into the sky. Faerith crashes back down onto the pavement, completely knocked out with a giant red mark on his face. Arthur watches the chaotic scene in disbelief while other elves rush to check on the unconscious noble. Arthur quickly grabs Tessia's hand and drags her away to a quiet bridge overlooking the city. He strictly scolds her, stating that a princess cannot just go around violently slugging her own subjects. Tessia cries out in distress, complaining that Arthur gets to go back home while she is forced to stay behind and miss the exchange entirely. She yells that Arthur is getting angry at her, exactly like her father does. She angrily calls him an old man and runs away crying through the stone gateway. Later that night, Tessia sits alone in her dark bedroom, crying on her bed. Suddenly, several glowing green fireflies float through her open window. She looks up and sees Arthur standing outside, holding the magical bugs. He smiles warmly and asks if she wants to sneak out to the woods just like they used to do. Tessia eagerly agrees. They walk together down a dark path through the massive gnarled trees. Tessia worries about running into kidnappers again, but Arthur promises they will just run away if that happens. They spot some large antlered wolves in the distance, but the animals leave them alone. They set up a small campfire in an open grassy field under a vast starry night sky. Tessia claims she is not tired, but she quickly gets terrified when a menacing tree monster with glowing pink eyes appears from the dark forest. Arthur swiftly handles the monster and returns to the campfire with a smug smile. He asks if she is still scared of ghosts. Tessia defensively claims she is just shivering because of the cold. As they sit by the fire, Tessia asks Arthur what the human kingdom is actually like. Arthur admits he does not really know since he never got the chance to explore it before falling off the cliff. Tessia quietly suggests that Arthur could just stay in Elenoir with her forever. Arthur looks at her in surprise. Before he can answer, he notices that Tessia has already fallen fast asleep by the fire. Sometime later, the highly anticipated day of departure finally arrives. Arthur packs his large backpack and stands ready in his ornate room. He heads out to the circular city plaza where a massive crowd has gathered around a central fountain. Virion approaches Arthur and hands him a golden pocket watch bearing the Aerolith family seal. He explains that it works as a compass and will help ensure Arthur never gets lost again when he decides to return to Elenoir. Arthur thanks Virion sincerely but looks around the crowded plaza, disappointed that he cannot find Tessia anywhere. Virion and Arthur join a large group of travelers, walking through a cavernous stone tunnel lined with glowing lamps. The group finally reaches the massive teleportation gateway, which is flanked by two towering stone statues. Just as they prepare to leave, Tessia desperately shouts Arthur's name and pushes her way through the thick crowd. She runs up to Arthur and immediately bows her head in front of him. Arthur smiles warmly and gently touches her red hair ribbons. Tessia looks up with teary eyes and awkwardly demands that he eat properly and not go wandering around getting into trouble. Arthur simply tells her he knows. He grabs her hand and pulls her into a tight, emotional hug in front of the entire crowd. Tessia closes her eyes and accepts the embrace, deeply moved by his affection. Arthur softly tells Tessia that he will miss her, and she tearfully replies that she will miss him too. With their final goodbyes completely settled, the massive stone gateway splits open, emitting a blinding white light. Arthur, carrying his heavy backpack and with Sylvie resting comfortably on his head, steps forward toward the portal, completely ready to travel to the flying city of Xyrus and finally reunite with his family. Upon arriving through the massive teleportation gateway from Elenoir, Arthur is immediately greeted by his parents, Reynolds and Alice, who are completely shocked and overjoyed to see him alive. They pull him into a massive hug, crying out of sheer relief. Standing nearby is a little girl in a pink dress, and Alice quickly introduces her as Eleanor, Arthur's younger sister who was born after he disappeared. Arthur kneels down and politely introduces himself to his little sister, and she happily accepts him while looking at Sylvie, the small black dragon resting on his shoulder. Soon after, the family heads to the Grand Helstia Manor where they are currently living. Inside a cozy living room, Alice aggressively questions Arthur about his health, mentioning that he told them he was sick when he first contacted them. Arthur reassures his mother that he is perfectly fine now, explaining that the sickness was simply a side effect of his manicore awakening way too early, which made his body unstable. Alice also worries about him being too skinny, but Arthur insists he has been eating well. Eleanor sits nearby and playfully tells her parents to stop interrogating him. Arthur then recounts his journey, explaining how he survived the fall through a mix of luck and subconscious magic. He tells them about meeting Tessia and recovering in the Elven Kingdom. However, he deliberately leaves out the part where he met Sylvia, the ancient dragon, knowing that revealing the whole truth right now would be far too dangerous for his family. He also introduces Sylvie as a rare mana beast he found dying in a nest during his travels, claiming he decided to take her in and care for her. Eleanor absolutely loves the little creature, and Sylvie quickly jumps onto her lap and head, instantly bonding with the little girl. Reynolds is just happy his son is healthy, but he quickly shifts the topic and eagerly asks what stage Arthur's manicore is currently at. Alice scolds him for asking such a competitive question the moment their son gets home, but Reynolds completely ignores her and brags about his own progress. He reveals that he is now working as the head security instructor for the Helstia auction house, and that his manicore reached the deep orange stage 2 years ago. The world's manicore stages are ranked by color, starting at black, then red, orange, yellow, silver, and finally white, with each color divided into 3 tiers of deep, standard, and light. Reynolds expects Arthur to be impressed, but Arthur simply smiles and asks what stage his father thinks he is at. Reynolds is taken aback, and Arthur casually drops the bomb that he is already at the light red stage. Reynolds completely loses his mind, realizing his 8-year-old son has almost caught up to him. He repeatedly curses in frustration, which immediately causes little Eleanor to start repeating the bad words, much to Alice's extreme annoyance. Unable to accept that his kid is already this strong, Reynolds angrily demands that they go to the backyard right now to spar. At that moment, Vincent Helstia, the wealthy owner of the auction house and Reynolds' boss, bursts into the room along with his wife Tabitha and their daughter Lilia. Vincent is incredibly relieved to see that Reynolds' son is actually alive. Arthur immediately bows and introduces himself with perfect manners, which completely stuns Vincent, who cannot believe this incredibly polite child is related to Reynolds. Lilia notices Sylvie and asks to pet her, and the two quickly become friends. Vincent mentions that this is his house, so it is good they are getting acquainted, but Reynolds quickly ruins the mood by announcing that he and Arthur are about to go tear up the backyard in a sparring match. Vincent starts sweating nervously, worried about his property. Outside on the massive green lawn, Vincent, Tabitha, Alice, and Lilia sit on the stone steps to watch. Vincent is terrified after Alice casually mentions that Arthur is already at the light red stage, despite only being 8 years old. Usually, even the most talented preteens admitted to the prestigious Xyrus Academy barely reach the deep red stage. Arthur stands across from his father, secretly thinking to himself that he would be even stronger if he had not spent so much time assimilating Sylvia's beast will instead of actively practicing magic. Reynolds smirks and warns Arthur that he is much tougher than he used to be, but Arthur confidently fires back that he is too. They charge at each other and an intense hand-to-hand fight begins. Reynolds throws a flurry of fast punches and high kicks, but Arthur effortlessly blocks, dodges, and deflects every single strike. Despite his small size, Arthur slides across the grass and holds his own perfectly, eventually forcing Reynolds to catch one of his punches. Reynolds tells him he needs to try harder and then launches Arthur backward across the yard, but Arthur flips through the air and lands perfectly on his feet. Reynolds laughs and admits that Arthur actually managed to land a solid hit when he let his guard down, but he warns his son that he is about to get completely serious. Suddenly, Reynolds engulfs his entire arm and body in intense swirling yellow and orange flames. He explains that while conjurers are naturally attuned to a specific element and focus on casting spells from a distance, augmenters like him have to work much harder to find their elemental compatibility and use it to enhance their physical attacks. Seeing his father use fire magic, Arthur reflects on his past life as King Grey, where he used Ki, a form of life force that anyone could fully control with enough intense effort. Because of his past experience mastering Ki, Arthur found his recent training with Virion to be incredibly easy and fruitful. Deciding not to hold back anymore, Arthur announces that he is getting serious too. He suddenly radiates a massive, blinding aura of yellow and green energy that completely engulfs his body and shoots up into the sky. The sheer power of his aura leaves Vincent, Tabitha, and Alice completely speechless. Arthur charges forward at insane speeds, leaving trails of green light behind him, and punches his fiery father head-on. The collision creates a massive explosion of fire and golden light that completely rocks the grassy hillside. Arthur slides back on his feet, totally uninjured, leaving massive tracks in the dirt. He remembers his secret training sessions with Virion back in the Elven Forest, where Virion taught him how to push his fire magic even further. Back in the present, Arthur stands calmly and suddenly generates intense arcs of golden lightning all around his body, revealing that he has mastered the advanced form of fire magic. Before the adults can even process this impossible feat, Arthur casually turns his attention to a nearby stone fountain. He extends his hand and the flowing water instantly freezes into a massive jagged pillar of glowing blue ice, proving that he has also mastered the advanced form of water magic. Reynolds is completely blown away, laughing in absolute disbelief as he playfully grabs Arthur and demands to know when and how he learned to do all of this. Arthur humbly claims he only learned it recently and can barely control it, though Vincent is entirely convinced that the boy is a once-in-a-generation genius. Later that evening, everyone gathers around a long wooden dining table for a massive feast to celebrate Arthur's return. Vincent, who has had quite a bit to drink, loudly declares that Arthur has an incredibly promising future. Reynolds proudly agrees, bragging about how Arthur awakened his mana core at just 3 years old and blew apart their entire house in the process. Vincent is stunned by the story but quickly gets down to business. He offers to fully pay for Arthur's tuition to enroll in Xyrus Academy, the most prestigious magic school on the entire continent. He explains that he knows the Academy's director personally and is more than happy to invest in Arthur's future. Alice is incredibly grateful for the generous offer, but hesitates, pointing out that Arthur is only 8 years old and might be too young for such a rigorous academy. Before Vincent can push the issue, Arthur politely interrupts. He thanks Vincent for the incredible opportunity, but respectfully declines for the time being, explaining that he just got back and really wants to spend some quality time with his family before rushing off to school. Vincent feels a little awkward and apologizes for getting ahead of himself. Arthur then excuses himself, claiming the sparring match tired him out, and leaves the dining hall. As he walks down the grand marble-lined hallways of the manor, he wonders if he was too blunt with Vincent. Suddenly, Lelia calls out to him, warning him that he is walking toward the basement and will definitely get lost. She smiles and tells him to follow her to a much better spot. Lilia leads Arthur into a cozy wooden kitchen where she immediately sits down at a small table and starts aggressively eating a massive plate of sliced meat and red sauce. An elderly maid and a butler watch her with amused expressions, noting that Lilia always comes to the kitchen to stress eat whenever she feels overwhelmed. The butler respectfully reminds her that her mother is worried about her gaining weight, but Lilia completely ignores him, claiming she is a growing girl who needs to eat. The maid quietly explains to Arthur that Vincent and Tabitha desperately want Lilia to awaken as a mage, even though neither of them has any magical abilities themselves. Lilia wants to become a sorcerer too, but the constant pressure from her parents is clearly taking a heavy toll on her. Arthur completely understands and feels a deep sense of sympathy for the girl, realizing that having supportive parents is a true blessing. Later that night, Arthur gets ready for bed in his new room. Reynolds and Alice come in to tuck him in, and Alice affectionately presses her forehead against his, assuring him that no matter how much he has grown or changed, he is still their sweet, smart, and kind little boy. Reynolds jokes that knowing his son is going to be the strongest sorcerer in the world is only the second best news he got today, implying that simply having Arthur back home is what truly matters. They also tell him not to worry about Vincent's offer, assuring him that the Helstius meant well and there is no pressure to attend the academy right now. Arthur smiles warmly and wishes them good night, feeling incredibly safe and happy for the first time in years. The next morning, as the sun rises over the massive manor, Arthur throws on his clothes and runs down the grand white staircase with Sylvie comfortably perched on his shoulder. When he reaches the bottom floor, he is completely shocked to find a group of 5 heavily armed individuals waiting for him in the hallway. It is the Twin Horns, his parents' old adventurer party, consisting of Angela Rose, Durden, Adam, Jasmine, and Helen. Angela immediately rushes forward and crushes Arthur in a massive suffocating hug, crying tears of joy and declaring how much she missed him. Durden, the large conjurer, smiles warmly and notes how much bigger Arthur has gotten, and Arthur happily gives him a high five. Adam complains that everyone is crying instead of smiling for the kid, but Helen tells him to shut up. Suddenly, Jasmine, the usually stoic and quiet rogue, drops to her knees and pulls Arthur into a tight, emotional embrace. She completely breaks down in tears, deeply apologizing for failing to protect him on the cliff years ago and begging for his forgiveness. Arthur gently comforts her, assuring her that it was not her fault and that he is just glad to see everyone again. The entire group then moves to the living room to catch up. Adam explains that they traveled all the way from Atiston City, taking various mercenary jobs along the way to pay for the long trip. He excitedly mentions that he bought a bunch of weird souvenirs from all the different towns they visited, pulling out a strange, off-colored item that immediately disgusts the girls. They bicker happily, completely falling back into their old comfortable dynamic. As Arthur sits on his yellow armchair and watches his family and friends laugh and argue together, he feels an overwhelming sense of peace and belonging. He realizes that after all the insane trials, monsters, and near-death experiences he faced, finally making it back to these people was worth absolutely everything, and he prepares to finally enjoy his new life alongside everyone he loves. Arthur lies spread eagle on the wooden floor of his bedroom and pants heavily. Sweat rolls down his face. He closes his eyes and wonders if he is being reckless. He questions if he should pursue a different training option with his beast will. However, he quickly dismisses the idea. He clenches his tired hand into a fist on the floor. He tells himself that he needs to master this power so he can defend the people he loves. That is the entire reason he fought so hard to come back home in the first place. He looks up and smiles. Sylvie, his small black-winged dragon, sits on the floor next to his head. He pulls her into a close embrace and says he is finally back home. Sylvie complains that he reeks of sweat. Arthur takes her to the bathroom to get cleaned up. He kneels beside a white clawfoot bathtub filled with pinkish bubbles and washes the squirming creature. He tells her to stop moving because they cannot have her stinking up this fancy mansion. Arthur thinks about how the Helstius have certainly reaped the massive benefits of running their successful auction house. He imagines their luxurious lifestyle with garden fountains, massive fireplaces, and fancy feasts. However, his thoughts quickly shift to Lilia. He remembers seeing her looking stressed and upset. Vincent and Tabitha want nothing more than for Lilia to awaken as a sorcerer, even though neither of them has any magical ability. Arthur feels terrible for her and cannot get the situation out of his head. He finishes wiping Sylvie down with a towel and tells her she is much cleaner now. Next, it is Arthur's turn to get cleaned up. Alice, Eleanor, Tabitha, and an older maid greet him. They take him to a flamboyant tailor to get a new outfit. The tailor is a muscular man with long brown hair, wearing a heart-patterned headband and a pink shirt. He poses confidently with his scissors and calls Arthur a real unpolished gem. The tailor leans in close and promises to make Arthur shine like a star. After the makeover, Arthur meets the girls in the bustling town square of Xyrus City. The city is beautiful with stone bridges, arches, and hanging red banners. Alice wears a white off-the-shoulder top and a green necklace. Eleanor wears pigtails and a pink bow. Tabitha wears a yellow dress. They tell Arthur he looks perfect. Eleanor grabs his hand and asks him to escort her. Arthur happily agrees. Alice explains that they wanted him to look nice because the Helstia auction house is a huge draw for wealthy people and royalty. Tabitha adds that they are going to show him around the city today. Arthur notices Eleanor holding his hand tightly. Alice jokes that she is jealous because Eleanor used to be all over her before Arthur came back. Arthur figures Eleanor just finds him novel since he only just returned home. Eleanor agrees with a big smile. They walk around the sunlit market on a cobblestone street. They look at jewelry stalls attended by bearded vendors and check out various jackets in a clothing shop. The townspeople are busy walking around the plaza. Arthur suddenly turns in surprise when a white rope ring randomly falls onto his head. He looks up and sees 4 boys in white-collared shirts with crest patches walking away and laughing. Tabitha explains that those are students from the prestigious Xyrus Magic Academy. She says that wearing that uniform practically makes them royalty in this town. Arthur senses something interesting nearby. He leads the group to a shop window displaying vibrant faceted gems on yellow pedestal. Tabitha explains that these are beast cores. They are magic cores taken from mana beasts that amplify the power of whoever holds them. Arthur is shocked to learn that beast cores can simply be bought and sold in normal stores. Tabitha mentions that some will be on sale at the next auction and offers to get him some. Arthur politely declines, stating he is satisfied with the beast will he already has. Meanwhile, Lilia looks at the beast cores with a sad expression. She begs Tabitha to buy her one. Tabitha firmly refuses. She tells Lilia that having a beast core is not a shortcut to awakening sorcery. Lilia argues that the weapon stores have cheaper ones, and she just wants to try it out. Tabitha completely shuts her down and refuses to talk about it anymore. The group then goes to sit at an outdoor cafe with blue umbrellas. They sit at a round wooden table and drink tea while eating pastries from a tiered birdcage-style tray. Arthur notices Lilia's sad reflection in his teacup. He realizes that Lilia is feeling an immense amount of pressure. He wonders if it is her father's expectations troubling her. He turns to speak to her, but she is completely gone. Arthur leaves the cafe to track her down. He spots her standing in a narrow alleyway with brick walls. He follows her to a large timber-framed building with a sign showing crossed swords. It is an armory filled with armor, shields, and weapons. Inside, Lilia stares at a wooden display case housing a large red faceted jewel and a smaller yellow crystalline gem. She tells Arthur she can afford it with her allowance and plans to buy it. Arthur walks over and grabs her wrist. He warns her that having a beast core is not a guarantee that she will be able to use magic. He reminds her that her mother already told her the exact same thing. Lilia snaps at him and says they will not know unless they try. She says she has already tried so many different things, and one more failure will not hurt her. Arthur tries to calm her down, but Lilia yells that he is special, so he does not understand her struggle. She cries and screams that her parents will not even let her touch a beast core, despite how much she begs. Arthur realizes he is the reason she is feeling all this extreme pressure right now. He asks her to talk it over, but she yells at him to leave her alone. She stumbles backwards and bumps into a boy wearing a white school uniform with a crest on the pocket. The boy is accompanied by 2 other academy students. Lilia cries and apologizes. The snobby blue-haired student laughs and asks if that is her idea of an apology. He asks her if she knows who she is dealing with. The students decide to have some fun and bully them. One of the boys generates a magical ball of fire to intimidate Arthur and Lilia. The blue-haired boy tells them not to bother trying to run away. Arthur steps in front of Lilia to protect her. He generates his own intense flame in his hand and glares at the students. He orders both of the students to release their power right now. The shop owner shouts from behind the counter and tells the students to stop. He warns them that if they upset Lilia, they will be dealing with the daughter of the Helstia family. The students realize the Helstias are the owners of the auction house and major donors to the academy. They start sweating nervously and realize the academy director would punish them severely if he found out. One of the angry students glares at Lilia and insults her. He claims she is too useless to earn a spot at the academy, so she is just trying to buy her way in with money. The students leave the shop. Later that evening, everyone is back at the massive mansion. Vincent paces nervously at the bottom of the indoor staircase. He is incredibly distressed after hearing about the fight with the academy students. He assures Lilia that the incident will not be enough to deprive her of a spot at the academy because of his sizable donations. He tells Arthur that he does not have to worry either if he chooses to enroll. Vincent then accidentally suggests that he wants to send Arthur to the academy instead. Lilia completely misinterprets this. She assumes her father wants to send Arthur in her place because she still cannot use magic. She clenches her fists and cries. Tabitha tries to calm her down, but Lilia yells that she hates her dad. She turns to Arthur and screams that she hates him too before running away. Vincent looks devastated. Later, Arthur stands outside the grand wooden doors of Lilia's room. He thinks about how Vincent's constant donations place unrelated expectations and massive pressure on Lilia. He walks away and finds Lilia in the kitchen. She sits at a round wooden table looking incredibly sad. Lilia apologizes to Arthur for her outburst. She admits that she was extremely jealous of him. She hates that he showed up out of nowhere with amazing power and stole all of her father's attention. She says it is her own fault for not awakening her magic no matter how much time passes. She cries and assumes her parents are finally tired of her. Arthur walks over and gently cups her tear-filled face with his hands. He tells her that even he can tell how hard she is trying. He smiles and shares a story about a girl who cheered him up when he was separated from his parents. He remembers Tessia, a young silver-haired elf girl, showing him glowing white orbs of light in a misty forest. Arthur holds Lilia's hand and generates a soft glowing green light between their palms to mimic his favorite flowers from the forest. He tells Lilia that her parents know exactly how hard she is working. He jokes that Vincent only focuses on him because he is a novelty, just like Eleanor thinks. Lilia laughs and wipes her tears. She admits that her dad just wants her to be a sorcerer so she can be happy. He donates to the academy for that exact reason, but she ended up putting all the pressure on herself. Arthur asks her if she truly wants to be able to use magic. He decides to execute a plan to help her. A little while later, Vincent sits in the living room with Tabitha, Alice, and Reynolds. He reads a letter from Lilia. In the letter, Lilia states that she is a useless burden to them as long as she cannot use magic. She promises to become an amazing sorcerer and then return to them. Vincent is absolutely shocked to hear that Lilia left the house. Arthur sits on the yellow sofa and calmly explains that he sent Lilia to the place he trained so she can awaken her magic. Vincent screams that is not the issue and asks why Arthur did this without asking them first. Arthur says it is what Lilia wanted because she knew her parents would make her waver. Vincent drops to his knees on the patterned tile floor. He cries and admits he has been a complete fool. He realizes he pushed his belief that being a sorcerer equals happiness onto his daughter. Tabitha reaches out to comfort him. Vincent yells with tears in his eyes that Lilia does not need to be a sorcerer and that he loves her even without magic. At that moment, Arthur gestures toward the gold-trimmed wooden doors. Lilia steps out of the shadows, revealing she was listening the entire time. Arthur apologizes for lying and tricking them. He says he knows losing a child is a pain worse than death, since he made his own parents suffer the exact same way. Vincent apologizes to Arthur, Alice, and Reynolds for being insensitive and trying to send Arthur away to the academy immediately after he got home. He then turns to Lilia and tells her she does not have to attend the academy. He promises to make her happy even if she is not a sorcerer. Lilia smiles and says she still wants to go to the academy. She wants to learn how to use magic so she can make other people happy just like Arthur does. Vincent and Tabitha warmly embrace their daughter. Arthur decides to help awaken Lilia's mana right now. He gathers Lilia and Eleanor on a massive floral rug in the room. He tells Eleanor she gets to be strong like her big brother. Vincent and Tabitha sit on the yellow sofa and watch. Arthur tells Lilia and Eleanor that the first step involves their breathing. He explains that mana gives off a stronger impression when they breathe in a focused and meditative fashion. He instructs them to take a deep breath and slowly let it out. He tells them to close their eyes and keep going until they see a light appear in the darkness. Eleanor quickly sees a pretty light but loses it when she messes up her breathing. Lilia complains she cannot see anything yet. Arthur tells her there is no rush and to keep breathing. He tells them they might feel a little heat. Suddenly, Lilia and Eleanor see several beautiful glowing green orbs floating in the dark space. They successfully sense the mana. The adults watch in total amazement as the gentle light fills the room. To celebrate this huge achievement, the group goes to the dining area and eats large plates of sliced duck meat with plenty of fat. They drink from wooden mugs and laugh together. Arthur sits next to Lilia and warns her that it might take 2 or 3 years until her power fully stabilizes. He tells her it will be a lot of hard work, but she needs to keep practicing her breathing every single day. Lilia happily agrees and wonders what kind of magical elements she will eventually be able to use. That night, Arthur and his family attend the grand 10th anniversary event at the Helstia auction house. The building looks like a massive glowing castle under the starry sky. Inside, the venue is packed with wealthy aristocrats, adventurers, and high-ranking nobles dressed in formal attire. Arthur walks through the grand hallways with his small black dragon Sylvie perched on his shoulder. He observes the displays of expensive beast cores and magical weapons, noting how successful Vincent and Tabitha are at running their business. Meanwhile, Reynolds is working as the head of security for the event, dressed sharply in a black and gold uniform. He looks completely serious and orders his men to stay on high alert to ensure nothing goes wrong. Arthur and his family take their seats in the dimly lit auditorium alongside the rest of the wealthy guests. Up on the main stage, Vincent grabs a microphone and officially kicks off the auction. He starts by introducing the guests of honor for the evening. King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen step out onto an elevated balcony overlooking the crowd. The audience immediately erupts into enthusiastic cheers, showing just how popular the royal family is in this city. Arthur watches the king and feels a sudden wave of nostalgia wash over him, as the sight reminds him of his past life when he ruled as a powerful king himself. Vincent proceeds to present the first few items up for bid, including a silver dagger that shocks targets with lightning magic and some ancient stone masks. Arthur finds the elemental weapon fascinating and makes a mental note to try enchanting his own weapons with magic later. As the auction drags on, Eleanor falls asleep on her mother's lap. Arthur suddenly realizes that Sylvie is no longer sitting with them. He leaves his seat and heads out into the grand hallways to look for her. Back on the main stage, Vincent unveils the main attraction of the night. It is a rare world lion cub locked inside a metal cage. Vincent explains that the creature has the potential to grow into a terrifying A-class mana beast. The bidding starts at 100 gold pieces, but King Blaine immediately shouts out a bid for 1,000 gold coins. No one dares to outbid their ruler, so the king wins the beast effortlessly. He plans to give the dangerous creature to Prince Curtis, so the boy can learn how to train and command a powerful partner. While this is happening, Sylvie wanders down a quiet red-carpeted hallway and runs right into Sebastian. Sebastian is a royal conjurer who serves as a personal bodyguard to the king. He immediately recognizes Sylvie as an incredibly rare and valuable mana beast. He kneels down and tries to coax her over, but Arthur finally catches up and asks the man to hand his partner back. Sebastian refuses to let her go. He claims that a small child like Arthur has no idea how to properly raise such a magnificent creature. Sebastian demands that Arthur hand Sylvie over to him so he can bring out her full magical potential. Arthur flatly rejects the demand, but Sebastian assumes the boy is just being stubborn. Sebastian tries to pull rank, stating that he is a loyal servant to the royal family and that taking the beast is for the good of the entire country. Arthur simply stares at him and asks why that matters. Realizing the boy is not going to obey, Sebastian loses his temper and unleashes a massive stream of fire directly at Arthur. The flames completely engulf the hallway, but Arthur stands perfectly still and lets the fire dissipate around him without taking a single scratch. Sebastian then threatens to punish Arthur's entire family for defying a royal order. Hearing his loved ones threatened is the final straw for Arthur. He completely snaps and unleashes his terrifying aura of pure bloodlust. The massive wave of dark energy shatters the stained glass windows and floods the entire auction house. Everyone inside the building is overwhelmed by the suffocating pressure. The king, the royal guards, Vincent, and all the guests drop to their knees in sheer terror. People scream and start scrambling to evacuate the building, thinking they are under a massive attack. Arthur eventually realizes he went too far and reins in his murderous aura. He finds Sylvie hiding nearby and apologizes for scaring her with his outburst. A short while later, King Blaine gathers his guards and Reynolds in a private red-lit room to discuss the massive security failure. The king is furious that an intruder managed to bypass the guards and terrorize his family. Sebastian shamelessly lies to the king's face. He claims that he tried to fight off the mysterious intruder and asks for Arthur's beast as a reward for his bravery. King Blaine agrees to the request and asks Reynolds to hand over the creature to his bodyguard. Reynolds respectfully bows and declines, explaining that his son obtained the beast entirely on his own, so it is not his place to give her away. The king then turns to Arthur and asks him to hand over the dragon. Arthur looks the king right in the eye and refuses, stating that he could never replace Sylvie. The royal knights immediately draw their weapons and scold Arthur for daring to make eye contact with the ruler of the nation. King Blaine tries to keep the peace and offers a compromise. He suggests trading his newly purchased world lion cub for Sylvie, arguing that a predator beast is much stronger than a reptile anyway. Arthur remains completely unbothered and rejects the offer again, making it clear that his partner is not for sale under any circumstances. King Blaine becomes visibly distressed and offended that a mere child has rejected him 3 times in a row. Arthur notices the king's wounded pride and decides to push back. He boldly asks King Blaine how much gold it would take for him to sell his own children. Sebastian explodes with anger at the blatant disrespect. He orders the 2 royal knights to execute Arthur on the spot for humiliating their ruler. The heavily armored knights charge straight at Arthur with a sword and a spear. Arthur calmly steps forward and strikes one of the knights, creating a blinding flash of yellow energy. In a matter of seconds, both fully armed knights are left lying completely unconscious on the floor. Sebastian panics and realizes his guards are useless. He grips his ornate golden staff and unleashes an enormous blast of fire across the room. Arthur easily dodges the attack and decides to end the fight. He activates his beast will, causing glowing yellow marks to appear on his face, while his right eye shines with a brilliant blue light. Using his overwhelming power, Arthur steps entirely outside the normal flow of time. He walks up to the terrified royal conjurer and projects a horrifying hallucination of a giant demonic entity directly into his mind. Sebastian collapses onto the floor and desperately begs for mercy, completely broken by the sheer terror of Arthur's power. However, manipulating time takes a massive toll on Arthur's young physical body. As soon as the fight ends, he loses consciousness and collapses onto the patterned floor. The next morning, Arthur wakes up in his bed back at the Helstia mansion. He stares at the ceiling and realizes that stepping outside the flow of time almost killed him. He admits to himself that he desperately needs more physical training if he ever wants to use that power safely. Alice suddenly walks into the bedroom carrying a wooden bucket, with Sylvie sitting happily on her shoulder. Alice is incredibly relieved to see her son awake after he passed out the night before. Later that day, Arthur and Alice decide to go shopping in the bustling town square to relieve some of the recent stress. They walk through the crowded cobblestone streets, decorated with red banners. Alice stops at a jewelry stall and buys a cute pink hair clip for Eleanor. Arthur is worried about spending so much money, especially since Reynolds might lose his job over the auction house incident. Alice reassures him and reveals that she is actually making a lot of money on her own. She explains that Tabitha helped her connect with wealthy nobles, and now her healing products are flying off the shelves in shops all across Cyrus City. Arthur is happy to hear that his mother is doing so well, and he helps her carry a giant pile of shopping bags back home. When they return to the massive white mansion, they find Reynolds standing nervously in the living room alongside a man wearing a maroon suit and glasses. The man is a royal envoy sent by King Blaine. The envoy formally apologizes to Arthur and his family on behalf of the royal family. He places a heavy red bag filled with gold coins on the coffee table as a gesture of good faith to make up for the incident. The envoy explains that the 2 knights who attacked Arthur have been permanently fired from their positions. He also mentions that Sebastian was relieved of his duties and sent away for medical treatment. When Sebastian woke up, he loudly claimed that Arthur was the one who broke his leg. However, the royal family decided to cover up the entire situation to avoid embarrassment. The envoy tells them the official story is that the 2 knights accidentally reflected their own magic back at Sebastian, causing his injuries. Arthur understands that the king is trying to sweep the humiliation under the rug, so he plays along and acts like a humble victim. Before leaving, the envoy gives Arthur a subtle warning, suggesting that the boy should really learn some proper manners because not everyone in the world is as forgiving as King Blaine. Arthur accepts the bag of gold coins and thanks the envoy for his time. Reynolds is just relieved that his son is alive and praises Arthur for putting up such a good fight. Later that night, Arthur sits alone in his dark bedroom with Sylvie. Despite winning the confrontation, he feels incredibly dejected. He realizes that he is still just a small child in this new world. If he truly wants to protect his loved ones and defy the power of entire nations, he is going to need a level of strength far beyond what he currently possesses. He decides to take immediate action. The very next day, Arthur heads to the prestigious Xyrus Magic Academy campus to look into his training options. The campus is massive and filled with students in green uniforms riding giant magical birds. While exploring the area, Arthur spots a strange green owl with red eyebrows. He follows the creature away from the main campus and runs down a dirt path deep into a lush green forest. He eventually reaches a clearing and completely stops in his tracks. Standing right in front of him is Director Goodsky, an elderly woman wearing a purple cloak and a black pointed witch's hat. She smiles warmly at Arthur and tells him that she has been waiting for him to arrive. Arthur stands completely still in the grassy field as Director Goodsky decides to test his magical abilities firsthand. He figures he needs to show off a little to prove he is worth her time. He starts the fight by using his wind magic. He surrounds himself with swirling green energy and sends several large rocks flying straight at her. Goodsky remains completely calm and easily stops the rocks in mid-air with a simple wave of her hand. Arthur is shocked by her defense and realizes his wind magic just does not have the same firepower as his fire and water elements. He immediately switches his strategy and unleashes a massive barrage of orange magical flames mixed with sharp shards of golden energy. The attack rains down on Goodsky, completely covering the area in thick smoke. However, she effortlessly defends against the intense onslaught with a glowing green magical seal. Goodsky then strikes back by unleashing a powerful wall of wind that hits Arthur head-on. The blast sends him flying backward across the grass until he crashes into the dirt. Goodsky is highly impressed by his combat skills and sorcery, noting that he is incredibly strong for his age. Arthur struggles to push himself up from the ground, refusing to give up. Goodsky decides it is time to finish the test and tells him to try not to lose consciousness. She channels intense teal magical energy into her hands and unleashes a massive rippling shockwave across the entire field. The magical attack washes over Arthur, and he immediately drops to his knees, clutching his head in sheer agony. He realizes she is using the element of sound, making her a highly unique and dangerous sorcerer. Goodsky dissipates her magic and officially tells Arthur that he passes the test. She states that his wind magic skills are so impressive that she wants to teach him personally. She also reveals that she knows he can use earth magic and suspects he has even more hidden elemental abilities. Arthur realizes she is incredibly sharp and sees right through him. He admits that he can use water magic as well. Goodsky asks what he really wants to tell her, so Arthur gets straight to the point. He bluntly states that he needs her massive influence and authority to protect his family. In exchange for her protection, he promises to enroll at Xyrus Academy and treat her as a master to whom he owes everything. Goodsky smiles broadly and notes that not even the royal family tries to negotiate with her so bluntly. She finds his confidence amusing and agrees that his potential is absolutely worth the deal. However, Arthur adds one major condition to their agreement. He tells her that he wants to delay his enrollment for 3 years so he can start school at the normal age. Goodsky is confused by this request. She points out that if he starts his training now, he will become much stronger, much faster. Arthur explains that he does not want to rush his life. He wants to become an adventurer and explore the world to live his life to the fullest before settling down at the academy. Goodsky accepts his reasoning and agrees to finalize their deal just as soon as he gets his family's approval. Arthur heads straight back to the Helstia mansion to break the news to his family. He gathers his parents, Vincent, Tabitha, Lilia, and Eleanor in the living room and uses Vincent as a middleman to help explain his magical powers and his bold plan to become an adventurer. Alice immediately freaks out. She completely rejects the idea and refuses to let her young son go off on a dangerous journey right after they just got him back. Arthur tries to calm her down, but she starts yelling at Reynolds for even entertaining the thought. Reynolds nervously tries to play peacemaker and suggests a compromise. He asks Alice to consider sending Arthur out with a trusted guardian to protect him. Alice is still furious and insists that Arthur is just too young for any of this. Arthur steps in and explains that it will not be a continuous journey. He promises to return home every few months to visit, and he even offers to come back more frequently if they want. Eleanor gets scared and asks if he is leaving right away. Arthur quickly reassures his little sister that he will not be leaving for quite a while. He tells his parents that he wants to explore the continent because there is simply too much about the world that he does not know yet. He also admits that he wants to experience the same adventurous lifestyle his parents once lived. He feels that staying home just to train would be incredibly dull and useless. Alice and Reynolds realize he is entirely serious about this path. Alice softens up but demands that Arthur stop keeping secrets from them. Arthur agrees and promises to be open, though he secretly feels a bit guilty about hiding the full extent of his magical abilities. Reynolds fully supports the bodyguard idea and suggests they find someone they completely trust to take the job. Later that evening, the adults meet up with the Twin Horns adventuring party to see if anyone is willing to escort Arthur. They all sit around a large wooden table eating food and drinking. Adam immediately rejects the offer. He claims that babysitting is not his thing, and jokes that Arthur would probably murder him in his sleep anyway. The others completely agree, pointing out that Adam is far too rude and unpleasant for the task. Arthur chimes in and agrees with them, causing Adam to get defensive. Durden also passes on the job. He explains that his large-scale magical spells are meant to protect entire groups of people, so he is not suited for guarding a single target. Helen feels her archery skills are not the right fit either. Just as they are running out of options, Jasmine raises her hand and volunteers to go. Everyone is surprised because Jasmine usually prefers working completely alone. Jasmine simply states that she wants to do it for Arthur's sake. Reynolds thinks about it and realizes she is actually the perfect choice. Since she is an augmenter who uses wind magic and recently reached the light orange core stage, her combat skills are absolutely ideal for keeping Arthur safe. Durden wishes he could go too, but he knows Jasmine is the best fit for the mission. Arthur is thrilled with the outcome and tells Jasmine he is looking forward to working with her. They share a warm smile, and the matter is officially settled. Time passes, and the family adjusts to the new arrangements. One evening, everyone gathers in a room and watches in shock as Lilia successfully meditates and practices magic entirely on her own. She no longer needs Arthur to project his mana into her body. Lilia happily apologizes for practicing without him. Eleanor gets slightly jealous of Lilia's progress. Arthur figures that Eleanor will likely awaken her own magical abilities around the age of 7 or 8 as long as she keeps practicing hard. However, he secretly hopes she does not awaken too young because he worries about her drawing unwanted attention and putting herself in danger. Sometime later, Arthur asks Reynolds if he can visit the auction house to find a weapon for his upcoming Adventurer Guild exam. Reynolds agrees, and they head to the massive storage facility with Vincent. Arthur spends a long time walking through the aisles, carefully inspecting various steel swords, polearms, and giant blades. Nothing feels right in his hands. He realizes that most weapons in this world are forged for adult augmenters, making them far too heavy and entirely unbalanced for a small child. He searches through crates and barrels while Sylvie helps him look around. He inspects a large black cannon and a few other random items but finds nothing useful. Eventually, he spots a long, heavy black staff leaning against a cart. He picks it up and realizes the weight distribution is all wrong for a staff. It feels much more like a sword. Curious, he decides to channel his magical energy into the object just to see what happens. The staff suddenly glows with an intense yellow energy and a fiery aura. The outer black shell shatters and breaks away, revealing a beautiful glowing cyan energy blade underneath. Arthur is completely amazed by the radiant weapon. He takes a firm grip on the hilt and takes a practice swing. He accidentally strikes a massive wooden barrel next to him and slices it perfectly in half with zero effort. He inspects the blade closely and notices the inscription Dawn's Ballad etched into the metal. He drops the glowing sword onto the patterned floor in surprise. When he picks it back up, he realizes the handle and grip have magically adjusted their length to perfectly fit his small hands. He remembers seeing incredible swords in his past life, but none of them ever adapted to their user like this one. He takes a few more practice swings and is absolutely thrilled with the perfect balance. He quickly puts the glowing sword back into its plain black scabbard just as Reynolds, Vincent, and another worker walk over. Arthur plays dumb and casually tells them he found a sturdy staff on the floor and wants to keep it for practice. The worker examines the scabbard and mentions that some old man dumped it at the auction house, complaining that no one was fit to use it. He adds that several appraisers checked it out and declared it was just a useless, hard stick. Vincent, completely unaware of the weapon's massive true value, tells Arthur to just take it since it is just gathering dust in the storage room anyway. Arthur happily accepts the disguised sword and calls Vincent uncle to secure the deal. Vincent is overjoyed by the affectionate nickname and gladly lets him have it. 9 years have officially passed since Arthur reincarnated into this new world. To celebrate his 9th birthday, his family and friends throw a massive outdoor party in the mansion's garden. The Twin Horns, the Helstius, and Arthur's family all gather around a huge banquet table piled high with roasted meats, fish, bread, and giant strawberry cakes. Everyone eats, drinks, and laughs together under the bright blue sky. After the massive feast, the group moves inside to the cozy living room to open presents. Alice and Reynolds go first and hand Arthur a special black gauntlet plated with silver. Alice explains that she personally enchanted the green gemstones on the gauntlet with her own healing magic to keep him safe on his journey. Arthur loves the gift and hugs his mother. Next, Vincent and Tabitha present matching gold rings for Arthur and Alice. They explain that the rings are magically linked together. If Arthur's mana ever drops to a dangerously low level during a fight, Alice's ring will immediately light up red to warn her. Adam then steps up and gives Arthur an incredibly rare and expensive communication scroll. He explains that Arthur can use his mana to record a voice message on the scroll, and Alice can use it to send one reply back. Arthur is deeply moved by all the thoughtful gifts. He looks around the room at his parents, Eleanor, the Helstius, and the Twin Horns. He tells them exactly how grateful he is for their constant love and support. He promises to work hard and stay safe, so they will never have to worry about him while he is out exploring. Alice pulls him into a tight hug and tells him she does not care about him finding fame or making money. She just wants him to return home alive. Arthur smiles warmly and completely agrees with her. Later that night, Arthur sits alone in his bedroom and packs his final supplies. He loads up his green backpack, grabs his white adventurer mask, and secures Dawn's ballad to his waist. He looks at his reflection and vows to become even stronger than he was in his past life as King Grey. He knows he needs absolute power if he wants to protect the family and friends he loves so much. Fully prepared, he walks out of his room and heads down the grand marble staircase to the main hall. Reynolds, Alice, and Eleanor are waiting at the bottom to see him off. Reynolds tells Arthur he looks just like a high-ranking adventurer, but he strongly warns him not to get cocky and to always rely on Jasmine in a fight. Alice reminds him to wear his new magical ring at all times. Arthur promises to be careful and says a final goodbye to his parents. He tells Eleanor to be a good girl and make sure Sylvie is tucked safely inside his backpack. He turns around and walks out the large front doors into the cool night air. Jasmine is already waiting for him in the courtyard, dressed in her dark green travel gear. She looks at him and asks if he is fully ready to go. Arthur gives a firm nod, and the two of them set off down the stone path together just as the bright sunrise begins to crest over the distant mountains. Upon arriving at the Xyrus branch of the Adventurers Guild, Arthur and Jasmine step inside the majestic Grand Hall to get him officially registered as an adventurer. Arthur decides to use the alias Note and wears his white mask at all times to hide his true identity, ensuring the royal family will not be able to track him down. Jasmine approaches the blonde receptionist, and since Jasmine is a highly respected A-class adventurer, the staff treats them with immediate priority. They are escorted past the main lobby and taken into a private, ornate room to meet the chief of the guild, Caspian Bladeheart. Caspian is a legendary AA-class adventurer who personally knows Jasmine's father, so he treats them with great respect. He greets Arthur and tells him that because of Jasmine's strong recommendation, they can completely skip the standard written exam and the mana core confirmation process. When Caspian reaches out to shake Arthur's hand, Arthur grips it firmly, and a massive surge of green magical energy erupts between their clasped hands. Caspian immediately realizes that Arthur possesses incredible physical and magical strength, noting his power with a sly smile. They then leave the office and walk down a long hallway toward the practical exam arena. Along the way, Arthur glances at his brown backpack and notices that his dragon companion Sylvie has slightly changed her appearance to look more like a small black bat to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Once they reach the massive open-air stone arena, Arthur and Jasmine take their seats in the tiered stone stands to watch the other examinees perform. A brown-haired girl named Diane Whitehall steps up first and uses a glowing wand to conjure a massive beam of blue water magic. The examiner, a woman wearing a large witch hat and a purple cloak, blocks the attack but notes that Diane's defenses are severely lacking. Despite this, she passes Diane as a C-class adventurer. Next, the examiner calls for a boy named Elijah Knight. Before the dark-haired boy wearing glasses even steps fully into the arena, the head examiner in silver armor announces that Elijah is automatically granted a B-class rank without having to take the practical test at all. Arthur and Jasmine are confused by this special treatment but continue watching. Then an arrogant 11-year-old half-elf named Lucas Wykes steps onto the dirt floor. Lucas smugly asks the examiner if he can just skip the test and go straight into the A-class ranks. The witch-hatted examiner ignores his terrible attitude and officially begins the test. Lucas immediately channels his magical energy and unleashes a massive swirling pillar of orange fire from his twisted wooden staff. The fiery explosion is so massive that it threatens to hit the spectators in the stands, but the examiner effortlessly summons a green magical shield to protect everyone from the blast. The examiner then tells Lucas that while his mana capacity and advanced fire spells are impressive, his lack of control and terrible attitude are massive weaknesses. She officially grades him as a B-class adventurer. Lucas is absolutely furious with the rank, claiming the test is completely unfair because someone interfered with his attack. He throws a temper tantrum and loudly threatens to tell his powerful father about the examiner's decision. After Lucas storms out of the arena, it is finally Arthur's turn to take the test. Jasmine fist bumps him and wishes him luck as he steps onto the dusty arena floor. However, before the regular examiner can begin, Caspian Bladeheart steps out onto the field and announces that he will personally administer Arthur's practical exam, since Arthur has absolutely no background file on record. The regular examiners and guards are completely shocked that an AA-class guild chief is stepping in for a simple assessment, but Caspian draws his golden-hilted sword and insists on fighting. Arthur draws his own blade, and the two engage in an incredibly fast and intense duel. Arthur uses his powerful fire magic combined with his past life sword skills, clashing fiercely against Caspian's flawless defenses. Their swords meet in a flurry of bright yellow sparks and massive explosions of magical energy that light up the entire arena. Caspian moves with incredible speed, leaping through the air and striking hard, but Arthur easily matches his pace and deflects every single blow. After a brief but spectacular exchange of strikes, Caspian calls an end to the fight. He is highly impressed by Arthur's abilities and officially registers him as a B-class adventurer, handing him a small gold plate as proof of his newly earned rank. Later that day, Caspian meets with the other examiners in his private office to discuss the unprecedented event of 3 children reaching B-class in a single day. He explains the backgrounds of the new recruits to the confused staff. He reveals that Lucas is a half-elf from the Wykes family, a noble house known for using highly questionable methods to produce powerful sorcerer children. He then explains that Elijah Knight is a human boy who was raised entirely by dwarves in the Darv Kingdom and was likely sent to Xyrus to act as a representative, which explains his automatic pass. When the examiners ask about the masked boy named Note, Caspian admits he has absolutely no idea who Arthur really is or where he comes from. However, since the highly influential Flamesworth family acts as his official guarantor, Caspian is deeply intrigued. He notes that while Arthur's fire magic was incredibly impressive, his raw physical sword skills were actually terrifying. Caspian realizes that Arthur's movements are still slightly awkward because his child body is still growing, and he shudders to think how unstoppable Arthur will become once he reaches adulthood. Meanwhile, Arthur and Jasmine walk together through the bustling guild halls. Arthur reflects on his duel with Caspian and realizes that the fight exposed a major flaw in his current fighting style. He has grown far too accustomed to the overwhelming magical powers of this new world and has completely neglected the raw physical sword techniques and diligence that made him a legendary king in his past life. Suddenly, Lucas Wykes blocks their path in the hallway. The arrogant half-elf grabs Arthur tightly by the collar and aggressively tells him not to get full of himself, just because they share the same adventurer rank. He claims that there are different levels of power even within the B-class, and tries to intimidate Arthur. Elijah Knight watches the confrontation unfold from a distance. Before a real fight can break out, Caspian intervenes and angrily orders Lucas to stop causing trouble in his guild. Arthur ignores the arrogant boy's threats, and Jasmine suggests they leave the city and head to a beast pasture a day's travel away so they can train in peace. When they finally arrive at the lush green pasture, Arthur is surprised by how calm and peaceful the mountainous area looks. Jasmine explains that lower-class adventurers usually come here to gather basic materials or practice their skills because the entire area has been thoroughly explored and is considered extremely safe. However, things quickly take a highly dangerous turn. Jasmine suddenly senses danger, draws her daggers, and sprints across the grassy hills with incredible speed. Arthur is stunned by how incredibly fast she moves and quickly runs after her to see what is wrong. They crest a large hill and spot a massive dark brown boar monster with glowing red eyes, thick armor plating, and 4 massive white tusks rampaging through the open field. The beast has already destroyed a wooden carriage and heavily injured several adult adventurers who are bleeding on the grass. Arthur immediately realizes this high-level monster is definitely not native to the area and figures it must have escaped from whoever captured it. The massive beast spots them and charges at full speed, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Jasmine tells Arthur to run and lunges headfirst at the monster. She leaps off the surrounding trees and slashes fiercely at the boar's thick armor, but her short blades barely leave a scratch on the tough plating. The beast retaliates wildly, knocking her out of the sky with a powerful physical blow. Arthur quickly jumps into the air, catches her safely, and lands gently on the grass. Realizing that Jasmine cannot defeat the armored monster alone, Arthur decides it is time to step up. He draws his glowing blue sword and channels his massive magical energy. Remembering his vow to never hold back and to always protect the people he cares about, he charges directly at the massive boar. He dodges its massive tusks and unleashes a massive swirling blast of fire mixed with a powerful blue energy slash from his sword. The devastating combination attack completely engulfs the beast in a spherical cage of fiery orange energy and slices right through its thick armor, ending the fight instantly. With the monster completely defeated, the sun begins to set over the lush mountains. The surviving adventurers thank them for saving their lives and carefully load the massive beast's carcass onto a wooden cart. Jasmine walks over to Arthur and playfully pinches his cheek, clearly annoyed that he looked so incredibly calm and didn't seem worried about her safety during the intense fight. Arthur complains about the pinching but is glad she is safe. Later that night, they sit together by a crackling campfire under the starry night sky. Jasmine opens up about her past and explains exactly why she left her noble family. She reveals that the Flamesworths have produced the kingdom's most powerful fire sorcerers for generations. Since her magical abilities awakened much earlier than any of her siblings, her parents placed massive expectations on her shoulders. However, when they discovered she completely lacked the talent for fire magic and could only use wind magic as a physical augmenter, they immediately branded her a failure and completely abandoned her. She decided to become an adventurer just to get away from their constant disappointment and cruel judgment. Hearing this story makes Arthur completely furious. He angrily declares that her family's logic makes absolutely no sense because there is no true hierarchy of magical elements. He insists that a mage's true worth is based entirely on how well they use their specific abilities in combat. Jasmine is genuinely surprised by his sudden outburst and starts laughing warmly, noting that she has never seen him get so worked up and defensive before. Arthur blushes and stays quiet, realizing his intense reaction stems directly from his past life where he was also treated as a total failure. He calms down and listens as Jasmine explains that meeting the Twin Horns completely changed her life for the better. They taught her how to trust other people, how to cooperate in battle, and how to finally believe in her own strength. Arthur looks up at the bright night sky and thinks deeply about his own closed-off nature. He wonders if he can truly change his mindset and learn to open up to people so he can properly protect everyone he loves. He reaches his hand up toward the stars with a newly found determination, promising himself that he will do whatever it takes to keep his family safe. Meanwhile, far away in the elven kingdom of Elenoir, Tessia is using a massive glowing green crystal ball to actively spy on Arthur. She watches him sitting by the campfire with Jasmine and becomes incredibly jealous that he is traveling around the continent with another girl. She struggles to hold the heavy, vibrating, scrying orb and accidentally drops it in shock when her grandfather, Virion, suddenly walks into the room. Virion calmly tells Tessia that if she is so incredibly jealous of Arthur taking on new challenges, she needs to stop spying on him and start her own training to catch up to his level. Tessia agrees with his advice, and Virion pulls out a massive ancient blue spellbook for her to begin her intense magical studies. 2 years quickly pass by. Rumors spread rapidly across the entire kingdom about a mysterious and incredibly powerful warrior known only as the Masked Swordsman. Other adventurers constantly talk about his legendary combat feats and note that he is always seen traveling alongside the famous Flamesworth girl. Arthur and Jasmine continue walking down a dirt path together, fully prepared to take on whatever new adventures come their way. Arthur reflects on his past life as King Grey. He remembers sitting on a throne surrounded by loyal soldiers and being known as the absolute strongest king in his world. However, he also remembers that as a king, he took countless lives and committed many terrible sins to maintain his power. Now, he finds himself granted a second chance at life in a completely new world. Arthur sits on a stone ledge and holds his magical staff while his bonded beast, Sylvie, rests comfortably on his shoulder. Jasmine approaches him and announces that they have received a brand new quest from the Adventurers Guild. Arthur agrees to head out, and they begin walking down a long dirt path together. Jasmine goes over the specific details of their mission. She explains that a remote village near the Beast Glades has completely lost contact with the outside world, so the guild asks them to investigate the situation. Jasmine strictly reminds Arthur that their absolute main priority is survival. Arthur asks what they should do if they encounter an aggressive beast during their investigation. Jasmine points out that their official quest does not include slaying any monsters, so there is absolutely no need to fight anything they see. Arthur completely agrees with her safe approach. Sylvie decides she wants to go train nearby while they work on the mission. Arthur tells the small black cat that he will let her know when they are finished, and Sylvie runs off into the lush green forest. Arthur and Jasmine continue walking together and look for any clues along the path. Jasmine asks Arthur if he notices anything unusual about their surroundings. Arthur points out that there are many footprints heading into the village, but barely any tracks heading away from it. Jasmine asks what their first move should be, and Arthur suggests they gather intelligence before doing anything else. Jasmine praises his judgment, and they use their magic to travel much faster. They soon arrive at the deserted village and look around. They see absolutely no signs of any people living there. Jasmine wonders if a wild beast attacked the villagers, but Arthur thinks that would be strange because there are absolutely no signs of a struggle or any destroyed buildings. They walk further into the village courtyard and suddenly spot a massive blue crystal sitting on the grass. They cautiously approach the strange object and wonder why a crystal would be out here. As they get closer, they realize there is an actual person trapped completely frozen inside the jagged blue crystal. They look around the courtyard and see several more large crystals scattered everywhere. Every single crystal contains a trapped villager. Jasmine looks extremely serious as they investigate. Suddenly, they spot a young girl in an orange dress holding a small basket. She is crying heavily. They walk up to her and ask her what happened to everyone. She explains that she was out in the forest gathering medicinal herbs, and when she came back, she found her entire village trapped in these crystals. Arthur immediately concludes that a powerful beast is responsible for this tragedy. The young girl cries uncontrollably about her missing family. Suddenly, a thin blue line of magic zips past the little girl out of nowhere and slices right through her skirt. Jasmine instantly gets into a combat stance. She pulls out her dagger and prepares to fight whatever is hiding in the trees. A flashback reveals what actually happened to the village earlier. A giant, terrifying spider monster attacked the innocent people. A woman in a brown dress was hung upside down by the monster's thick web. The monster had many glowing eyes and fired powerful energy beams from its mouth to trap people in crystals. Arthur and Jasmine were actually there when it happened, but Jasmine forced Arthur to run away with her to survive. Meanwhile, in a dark, candlelit room, two hooded figures stand around a wooden table. They closely examine a detailed map of the continent. One of the figures notes that the current alliance between the humans, elves, and dwarves is a major problem for their secret plans. The elderly hooded figure explains that events have a natural flow to them, and sometimes it is quite pleasant to go with that flow. The figure uses bright green magic on the map and points directly to the Beast Glade. He explains that the future leaders of the continent are currently gathering there to train and hone their skills. He firmly declares that they must prevent this gathering at all costs. The other hooded man smiles and says he thought this specific task would be annoying, but he actually finds it quite entertaining to manipulate things behind the scenes. Back in the lush forest, Arthur and Jasmine hide behind some thick bushes. Arthur asks Jasmine what kind of terrifying beast they are dealing with. Jasmine explains that the monster is an arachne. She says it is one of the top 5 most dangerous beasts she never wants to fight. Arthur asks if she has ever fought one before. Jasmine admits she fought them 5 times in the past, but only managed to kill one of them. She explains that it took the entire Twin Horns party to defeat it. She specifically mentions that Arthur's parents, Reynolds and Alice, were absolutely crucial to their victory. Jasmine explains that Alice's healing powers as an emitter were the only thing that could break the Arachne's crystal curse. The only other way to break the curse is to completely kill the arachne itself. Jasmine adds that arachnes have incredibly high resistance to magic, making most spells completely useless against them. Their outer shells are also so tough that regular swords just bounce right off their armor. Because of this, Jasmine concludes they have absolutely no way to defeat the creature right now. She mentions that arachnes usually stay deep inside dark dungeons because they hate daylight, so it is weird to see one out here. Jasmine then reminds Arthur that she has taught him everything she knows about being an adventurer. She taught him how to fight with swords and magic, but more importantly, she taught him the things he needs to know to survive dangerous situations. She asks him what their best move is right now. Arthur correctly answers that they should retreat to the guild, gather a proper team of fighters, and return to save the village once they are fully prepared. Jasmine agrees with his smart plan. However, before they can escape, the massive arachne sneaks up behind them. The monster lunges at them with glowing purple magic. Jasmine immediately pushes Arthur out of the way to save his life. The arachne hits Jasmine with its powerful curse, and she gets completely encased in a massive blue ice crystal. Arthur screams her name in absolute panic. Jasmine is totally trapped and cannot move. Arthur sits on the ground in shock and stares at the terrifying monster. He realizes he is completely outmatched and feels totally helpless again. He thinks about his past life as a powerful king. He remembers charging into battle with his soldiers and easily striking down armored knights with his massive sword. He was considered the absolute strongest king in his world, and a single swing of his blade was always enough to win his battles. He remembers fighting massive beasts in his past life and easily cutting them down. However, he quickly realizes that in this new world, simply swinging a sword is not enough anymore. He decides he needs to combine his old sword skills with his new fire magic to stand a chance. He ignites his two swords with bright orange flames. He charges directly at the arachne and unleashes a massive fiery assault. He slashes the monster repeatedly with his burning blades. The attacks seem to hurt the beast at first, but the arachne's tough shell quickly absorbs the intense heat. The arachne roars furiously and summons jagged rocky spikes from the ground to attack Arthur. Arthur dodges the deadly spikes and realizes his fire magic is completely useless against the monster's high magic resistance. He remembers Jasmine telling him that magic does not work on the creature's tough outer shell. He thinks quickly and comes up with a completely new strategy. He wonders what would happen if he cast his magic directly inside the monster instead of on its armor. He easily dodges the monster's massive spiked legs and jumps right onto its back. He drives his glowing blue sword deep into the cracks of the monster's armor. He then unleashes a massive surge of magic directly into the monster's internal organs. The arachne screeches in absolute agony. Brilliant yellow electricity flashes everywhere as Arthur overloads the monster with raw magical energy. The massive beast completely shatters into glowing pieces. The arachne falls to the ground, completely defeated. Arthur stands over the dead monster and heavily pants from exhaustion. He holds his glowing sword and realizes his victory was extremely sloppy. He thinks about how much the intense battle strained his small body. He admits that his old way of fighting combined with his new magic is still far from what he is aiming for. He knows he needs to train much harder to get stronger. Exhausted, Arthur collapses onto the green grass. He stares up at the bright blue sky and tries to catch his breath. Suddenly, Sylvie jumps out of nowhere and lands directly on his face. Arthur sits up and gently pulls the small black kitten off his face. He asks her if something is wrong. Sylvie tells him she felt a massive surge of anger from him during the fight. Arthur smiles and reassures her that everything is fine now because he took care of the monster. Sylvie asks if he is totally sure, and Arthur promises her he is completely okay. Sylvie wishes him luck with his next problem. Arthur is confused and asks what she means by that. Suddenly, Jasmine appears from behind a large tree. She points her sharp knife directly at Arthur. Since the arachne is dead, the crystal curse on her body is completely broken. Arthur nervously smiles and tries to celebrate her newly found freedom. Jasmine angrily tells him she could easily beat him up right now. Arthur tells her not to joke around like that. Jasmine stays completely serious and asks if that is really all he has to say to her. Arthur looks down and apologizes. Jasmine asks him what he is apologizing for. Arthur admits he is sorry for ignoring her instructions and fighting the highly dangerous monster all by himself. He confesses that he let his emotions control his actions. Jasmine lowers her knife and tells him she forgives him as long as he understands his massive mistake. She then asks if he really defeated the massive arachne all by himself. Arthur humbly says that was all he did. He admits that he gained some new power during the fight, but it is still not the kind of true power he desperately wants. Jasmine asks him what kind of power he is searching for. Arthur looks at her seriously and says he wants the power to protect people. He remembers his past life and how his weakness separated him from his family. He remembers crying because he could not protect the people he cared about. He also remembers the ancient white dragon who saved his life when he first arrived in this world. He resolves to live his new life in a way that will leave him with absolutely no regrets. Jasmine smiles and tells him his reckless actions are not his fault, but he needs to be much more careful. She warns him that his parents and his little sister would be absolutely devastated if he died. She strictly tells him not to take crazy risks just to save her. Arthur looks her straight in the eyes and says he cannot do that because he cares about her too. Jasmine instantly blushes bright red. She gets totally flustered and tries to hide her embarrassment. She reaches out and pulls Arthur's cheeks as punishment. She complains that the only thing he is getting better at is sweet-talking women. Arthur cries a single tear as she stretches his face. Jasmine finally lets him go and sincerely thanks him for saving her life. Arthur tells her not to mention it. Jasmine then suggests they harvest the arachne's valuable mana core before they leave the area. They return to the village and find that all the trapped villagers are finally free from the blue crystals. The villagers are incredibly happy and completely safe. Arthur and Jasmine head back to the Adventurers Guild in the city. They enter a crowded wooden tavern to report their success. A boy with glasses and Lucas Wykes are sitting at a table nearby. Arthur casually tells them he just fought an arachne. The boy with glasses is completely shocked that Arthur made it back alive. Lucas laughs mockingly and asks if Arthur is seriously trying to pass off a fake story. He demands to see the arachne's mana core as absolute proof. Arthur admits they were unable to collect the core. Lucas immediately calls him a liar and says the whole story is totally suspicious. He suggests Arthur probably just fought a regular giant spider and got scared. To prove him completely wrong, Arthur pulls out the massive yellow head of the arachne and drops it heavily onto the wooden table. Everyone in the tavern is stunned. The boy with glasses immediately recognizes it as a highly rare cursing eye of petrification. He touches the hard shell and asks Arthur how he managed to cut through it. Lucas realizes Arthur is actually telling the truth, but his massive ego refuses to let him admit defeat. He arrogantly claims that a mana beast like that would be absolutely no match for his own magical skills. He tells Arthur to make sure to call him for help next time, and quickly storms out of the tavern. Jasmine sighs and notes that Lucas never changes. Jasmine then tells Arthur it is time for them to go home. Arthur returns to his family's massive mansion in the city. As soon as he walks through the large doors, his little sister Eleanor runs up and gives him a massive hug. His parents, Reynolds and Alice, are absolutely thrilled to see him. Reynolds excitedly asks Arthur to tell them all about his epic adventures. Arthur proudly announces that he completely defeated an arachne. Reynolds and Alice immediately freeze in pure shock. Jasmine admits that the fight was incredibly difficult and they were almost wiped out multiple times. Eleanor completely ignores the danger and excitedly asks Arthur how he managed to win the fight. Arthur casually explains that he had to focus his attacks on a single spot and cast his magic directly inside the beast. Alice suddenly glares at them with terrifying anger. She aggressively orders Arthur and Jasmine to kneel on the floor. Arthur and Jasmine immediately drop to their knees and look up with incredibly apologetic expressions. Alice furiously screams at Arthur for breaking his promise to stay away from dangerous situations. Arthur tries to argue that avoiding danger is basically impossible for an adventurer. Alice completely refuses to listen to his excuses and yells at Jasmine for letting him fight. She reminds Jasmine that she only allowed Arthur to become an adventurer because Jasmine strictly promised to keep him safe. Alice furiously points out that an arachne is one of the top 5 most dangerous monsters in the entire world. Arthur tries to defend Jasmine by taking full responsibility, but Alice completely ignores him. She breaks down crying and says she was absolutely terrified of losing her son. Reynolds steps in and calmly comforts his crying wife. He sternly tells Arthur to always follow Jasmine's instructions from now on to avoid this drama. Arthur fully agrees. Jasmine informs them that she already reported the arachne incident to the guild. Reynolds promises to warn the other adventurers to be highly careful in the forest. Alice wipes her tears and begs Arthur not to make her worry so much. Arthur promises to be much more careful. Later that day, Arthur and Jasmine go out to the mansion's paved courtyard to spar. Jasmine sets the rules and tells Arthur they are not allowed to use any magic. They must fight using only their raw physical strength and wooden practice swords. They clash fiercely. Arthur realizes that his massive over-reliance on magic has made him forget the raw physical combat skills he perfected in his past life. He knows he needs to master both physical and magical combat if he wants enough power to truly protect his loved one. He swings his wooden sword with intense focus and determination. After the intense match ends, Arthur thanks Jasmine for the spar. He looks up at the bright blue sky and thinks deeply about Tessia. He wonders what the elf princess is doing right now. He remembers her being as fierce as a gale wind during their time together. Meanwhile, far away in a mountainous area, Tessia is going through absolute hell. She is completely stranded on top of a massive round boulder wedged tightly between two jagged cliffs. Dust clouds swirl all around her. She screams and cries in utter distress, furiously complaining that nobody ever warned her that training would be this incredibly miserable. Tessia sits at a round wooden table in a busy tavern with her friends Vio and Faye, closely examining a detailed map spread out before them. They are trying to figure out their next move, and they realize their grandfather Virion actually sent them all the way into human territory just to hunt down some wild boars. Faye is extremely annoyed by this and complains that Virion is basically treating them like cheap handymen instead of actual royalty. Vio quickly covers Faye's mouth and reminds him that they have to act appropriately because they are representing the proud Elenoir kingdom on this mission. Tessia decides it is time to leave, but as she turns around she accidentally bumps into a bald man. Without missing a beat, Tessia ruthlessly kicks the man right in the crotch and sends him flying across the room. This instantly triggers a massive bar brawl. An angry man throws a heavy wooden mug full of beer directly at Tessia's head, but she easily summons a glowing green magical shield to block it. Another aggressive man tries to grab Tessia by the shoulders from behind, but she effortlessly flips him over and slams him face first onto a wooden table. Seeing that the situation is getting completely out of hand, Faye decides to end the fight quickly. He unleashes a massive sweeping wave of blue water magic that completely washes all the angry men straight out of the tavern doors. After escaping the chaotic tavern, the group jogs through a vast rocky mountain landscape. Faye is exhausted and complains about the constant harassment they face from humans. A flashback reveals a previous conversation they had with Virion before leaving on their journey. Virion explained that even though a formal peace treaty currently exists between the humans, elves, and dwarves, the ordinary citizens still hold deep grudges from the long history of war. Virion specifically wants Tessia to go on this mission to serve as a shining example of elven goodwill and help ease the intense racial tension. During their carriage ride through the human lands, they are suddenly ambushed by a violent group of bandits. The girls and their guards easily fight back and overpower the attackers. Vio steps up and completely wipes out the remaining bandits with a massive blast of green magical energy. Meanwhile, in a dark, secret stone room, two mysterious hooded figures stand over a wooden table. They are closely tracking Tessia's movements using a map that glows with bright green magic. They discuss how elves are highly talented with magic but possess incredibly fragile physical bodies. The villains plan to use this weakness to their advantage. They intend to assassinate the elf princess while she is in human territory to completely destroy the fragile peace treaty and spark a new war. Completely unaware of the dark plot against her, Tessia tries to gather information about the wild boars from the local human villagers. She tries talking to some older women and an elderly man, but they completely ignore her and rudely tell her to leave just because she is an elf. Tessia gets incredibly frustrated and sits down on a rock, complaining to Vio and Faye that the humans will not even give them a chance to speak. Suddenly, a little human boy and girl throw a hard brown acorn right at Tessia's forehead. Tessia gets furious and angrily confronts the children for throwing things at her. The kids get scared but quickly apologize. They explain that a giant boar has been causing massive damage to their village and tell Tessia that the monster always attacks from the east. Tessia immediately promises the kids that her group will take care of the beast for them. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room in a different city, Arthur sits at a table wearing his dark hoodie and a white mask with blue designs. He is currently working as an adventurer under the alias Note. He listens as Lucas Wykes talks to his friend Elijah nearby. Lucas arrogantly explains that his wealthy family purposely recruits talented elves to interbreed with them, hoping to produce the most powerful mages possible. Lucas shows off his bright fire magic and confidently declares that he will eventually become the absolute greatest mage on the entire continent. Arthur is completely unimpressed by the speech. He simply wishes Lucas good luck and casually walks away, stating that he no longer cares about being the strongest. Lucas is left completely confused and frustrated by Arthur's dismissive attitude. Arthur then meets up with Jasmine, and they agree to head out on their next long adventuring quest together. Back in the desert wilderness, Tessia, Vio, and Faye search for the wild boar. Suddenly, several massive boulders fall from the sky and cause a huge explosion right in front of them. As the thick dust clears, a giant, terrifying, corrupted boar with glowing red eyes and massive white tusks emerges from the crater. Tessia realizes this is no ordinary animal, but a highly dangerous mana beast. The girls immediately jump into action. Tessia fires powerful arcs of green magical energy, and Faye unleashes a massive swirling blast of blue water magic. Their combined attacks hit the monster directly and cause a brilliant explosion. The group celebrates their quick victory, but their joy vanishes when the giant boar charges straight out of the smoke completely unharmed. They realize their magic is totally useless against the beast's incredibly thick armor. The girls panic and run for their lives across the rocky canyon. The boar completely ignores Vio's magical attacks and kicks up a storm of rocks. A large boulder hits Vio squarely in the stomach, and she falls hard to the dusty ground. The giant boar roars and prepares to crush her, but Faye quickly blasts the monster with water magic to push it away. Faye and Vio regroup on a nearby cliff and tell Tessia they need to retreat immediately because they are completely out of mana and stamina. Tessia stubbornly refuses to give up. She decides to act as bait and shouts at the boar to get its attention. She runs frantically across the reddish-brown rocks, while complaining that physical labor is not her strong suit. Once she lures the beast into position, she signals her friends. Faye uses his remaining magic to trip the monster, and Tessia casts a massive spell that summons 3 huge boulders from the sky. The rocks slam directly into the boar and pin it at the bottom of a deep crater. Tessia sighs in relief, thinking she finally won. However, the monstrous boar easily breaks free and leaps high into the air, dive-bombing straight toward her. Tessia fires a desperate green energy blast, but the monster easily brushes it off. The resulting explosion knocks Vio and Faye backward, leaving Tessia completely alone against the beast. Vio screams at Tessia to run, but Tessia refuses to back down. She remembers Arthur and thinks about what he would do in this situation. She recalls all the time they spent training together in the forest, their sparring matches, and how he always protected her. She specifically remembers the special technique Arthur taught her for channeling her beast will. Tessia closes her eyes and gathers all her remaining power. She surrounds herself with a blinding, swirling golden aura of magical energy. Instead of relying on long-range spells, she uses the golden magic to completely enhance her physical body. As the giant boar charges at her, Tessia lunges forward and punches the monster with incredible force. The impact creates a massive explosion of blinding white light that completely obliterates the giant beast. After the intense battle, Tessia accidentally jumps up and bumps her head hard against a pink magical shield that Vio created to protect them. Tessia complains about the pain, and Vio yells at her for recklessly fighting like a close combat warrior instead of a mage. The mysterious hooded villains watch the entire fight from the shadows and realize Tessia is much more talented than they originally thought. They decide they will need to prepare an even stronger mana beast for their next assassination attempt. Far away in Elenoir, Virion and Cynthia watch Tessia's victory through a glowing green crystal ball. Virion smiles proudly and notes that Tessia's brief time with Arthur was enough to completely change her into a capable fighter. After defeating the beast, Tessia and her friends return to the human village. The little boy and girl thank her profusely for saving their home, and Tessia feels incredibly proud of her accomplishment. Later, the group relaxes at a rustic inn and discusses their future travel plans over mugs of frothy milk. Faye and Vio mention that they are heading to Xyrus City next. They casually remark about how nice it will be to see Arthur again once they arrive. Tessia completely freezes and is absolutely shocked to hear that her friends know Arthur. She demands to know how they know him, and Vio explains that they actually traveled to Xyrus with Arthur and see him quite regularly. Vio even mentions how beautiful Arthur's mother Alice is, how cute his sister Eleanor is, and how his father Reynolds is a strong fighter. They talk about how the family baked sweets for them, and Tessia gets incredibly jealous. She is furious that her friends have been hanging out with Arthur while she has not seen him since he originally left the forest. Completely unable to contain herself, Tessia immediately travels to Xyrus City. She stands outside Arthur's massive white mansion and completely freaks out about how she should greet him. She paces back and forth, practicing different poses and trying to decide if she should act cool or excited. Ultimately, she loses her patience and sprints straight through the front gate. She runs right past Alice and Eleanor, who are standing by the entrance holding groceries. Tessia completely ignores them and wildly sprints across the stone courtyard. Her purple cape billows behind her as she runs around in a total panic, screaming Arthur's name at the top of her lungs and desperately demanding to know where he is hiding. However, Arthur is not even at the mansion right now. Instead, he wakes up on a sandy beach wearing his white mask and dark cloak, having adopted his note persona to completely hide his true identity from the public. He sits up and looks at the shattered remains of his wooden boat scattered across the shore. Nearby, he spots his fellow adventurers, Elijah and Lucas. Elijah explains that he came to this remote island on an official guild quest to investigate why so many fishing boats were getting stranded in these dangerous waters. Unfortunately, his own boat ran into a massive unnatural storm and was completely destroyed before they even reached their destination. Lucas, a wealthy and incredibly arrogant noble with light hair, immediately starts mocking Elijah and Arthur for their bad luck. He calls them complete losers and says he finds it hard to believe they are actually high-ranked adventurers if a simple storm could take them down so easily. Elijah gets angry and tells Lucas to speak for himself, since his boat was also wrecked by the exact same storm. Arthur completely ignores the argument and assesses their current situation, noting that their boat is totally useless now and cannot be repaired. He points out that they desperately need to find a new way off the island before they run out of supplies. Elijah admits Lucas is right about their terrible situation, but Arthur remains entirely calm. He knows that his companion Jasmine was on the boat with him when the storm hit, and he firmly believes she is definitely still alive somewhere on the island. Hoping to find her quickly, Arthur pulls out his magical communication stone and contacts his small dragon familiar, Sylvie. He instructs the dragon to fly around the beach and track down Jasmine before she gets into any trouble. At that very moment, Jasmine is wandering the rocky cliffs of the island completely alone. She feels incredibly guilty about losing Arthur in the storm and blames herself for the entire disaster. A while back, she had a highly serious meeting with Arthur's father, Reynolds, regarding the recent massive spike in monster attacks across the region. Reynolds explained that many young adventurers were encountering incredibly dangerous A-rank beasts while on simple, low-level quests that should have been safe. He strongly suspected the Adventurers Guild made a massive miscalculation, or that a rogue faction actively resisting the new peace alliance between the human, elf, and dwarf kingdoms was intentionally setting traps to kill people and cause chaos. Although he had no solid proof to back up his claims, Reynolds admitted he wished Arthur would just quit being an adventurer altogether to avoid getting killed. Jasmine reassured him that Arthur's stubbornness was exactly like his mother's, meaning he would absolutely never quit his job. Reynolds accepted this unfortunate truth and officially tasked Jasmine with keeping his son safe no matter what. Remembering her promise to Reynolds, Jasmine draws her sword and sprints across the island to find Arthur. During her desperate search, she runs into two human guards crying loudly on a dirt path. They are frantically searching for their young master, Lucas. Jasmine is severely disappointed because she had hoped they were looking for Arthur. The guards explain they were hired directly by the human royal family to protect Lucas on his vital mission, but the violent storm separated them from him. Back at the beach, Lucas shows off his incredible wealth by using an expensive dimensional ring to summon a massive pile of camping supplies, including a large, sturdy tent. Elijah is absolutely amazed to see the rare ring in person, noting that even the cheapest ones cost over 1,000 gold coins. He asks Arthur if he owns one, but Arthur admits he does not have that kind of money. While Lucas stands around doing absolutely nothing, Arthur quickly and efficiently sets up the tent using his practical survival skills. Elijah praises Arthur for being so handy, and Arthur mentions that his partner taught him how to survive in the wild. Elijah then complains that he is completely starving and asks Lucas for some food. Lucas casually replies that he doesn't carry any food because procuring meals is the job of his lower-class subordinates. Realizing Lucas is completely useless for actual survival, Arthur and Elijah head deep into the forest to forage for themselves. They return a little while later carrying a large leaf full of small fish and wild mushrooms. Elijah is highly impressed by Arthur's gathering skills and thanks him. Arthur then hands the raw fish directly to Lucas and orders him to cook them. Lucas gets extremely offended by the demand and asks why he has to do the dirty work of cooking. Arthur calmly points out that Lucas is the most proficient at fire magic in their entire group, so he needs to contribute to the camp's survival instead of just standing around. Lucas reluctantly agrees to help and uses a massive, wildly overpowered fire spell to blast the fish. The intense heat completely chars the food instantly, and Elijah yells at him for ruining their dinner, begging him to leave some food actually edible for them. Lucas claims he knows exactly what he is doing and carefully roasts the remaining mushrooms over a much smaller magical flame. He proudly declares this cooking method demonstrates the true power of the Wykes family. Arthur and Elijah find the food totally bland and terrible looking, but they admit the fish tastes okay and are just glad to have a warm meal. Elijah points out that Arthur easily tricked the arrogant noble into cooking for them, and they all sit around the campfire eating peacefully. The following morning, Arthur returns from scouting the island and reports his findings to Elijah and Lucas. He confirms there are absolutely no other humans on the island besides them. He also found the wreckage of Elijah and Lucas's boat on the other side of the beach, proving they have no vessel to sail home. Arthur outlines their only two options: wait for a rescue team or try to swim to the continent themselves. Elijah heavily doubts anyone is coming to save them, but Arthur is completely confident Jasmine survived the crash and will eventually find them. Elijah is surprised by how much Arthur trusts her abilities. Lucas then interrupts their planning to finally reveal his actual quest objective. He pulls out a scroll featuring a small black lizard-like creature. He explains this monster possesses the rare ability to control the weather and is the exact reason all the fishing boats have been sinking lately. Because it is so dangerous to naval trade, the human king personally ordered the Wykes family to eliminate it. Lucas confidently states the monster builds its nest near water and claims the surrounding territory as its own. He intends to burn the beast to death entirely by himself to prove his family's supreme power, strictly warning Arthur and Elijah not to get in his way during the fight. The group tracks the monster to a massive dark cave hidden in a rocky canyon. Believing the creature is just a small lizard, Lucas fires a gigantic blast of yellow fire magic straight into the cavern to flush it out. The explosion causes a massive shockwave that shatters the surrounding cliffs and fills the air with dust. However, instead of a small lizard, an absolutely gigantic catfish-like monster with glowing markings emerges from the smoke. The beast is overwhelmingly large, and the boys immediately realize Lucas grossly underestimated his target. The monster opens its massive mouth and fires a devastating beam of blue energy that obliterates the landscape and nearly kills them. Terrified by the beast's raw power, Elijah screams that they need to run away immediately. Arthur quickly takes charge of the situation. He draws his dual swords and volunteers to draw the monster's attention, ordering Lucas to hit it with his biggest fireballs and telling Elijah to cover their flank with earth magic. Arthur leaps across the rocky canyon and strikes the monster with several powerful blue magic slashes. Lucas follows up with a massive explosion of fire magic that completely engulfs the creature. However, when the smoke clears, they see the monster simply regenerating all the damage instantly. Elijah uses his earth magic to launch sharp rocks directly at it, but their attacks barely leave a scratch on its thick hide. Elijah starts to panic, realizing they will eventually tire themselves out at this rate, while the monster takes no real damage. Seeing their current strategy failing completely, Arthur devises a risky new plan. He tells Lucas to stand back and prepare his absolute strongest spell. Arthur then grabs Elijah and uses him to quickly maneuver around the beast's massive swinging limbs. Lucas feels completely ignored by their teamwork and gets furious. He screams that he is the strongest sorcerer in the entire kingdom and unleashes another massive blast of fire to prove his worth. Arthur and Elijah manage to land directly on the beast's back during the distraction. Elijah uses his magic to summon a barrage of sharp earth spikes that pierce directly into the monster's glowing sigil, which completely disables its regeneration ability. With the healing factor stopped, Arthur steps up and delivers a brutal cross-slash with his swords. The combined attacks severely weaken the beast, allowing Lucas to finish it off with a final, massive explosion that knocks the creature to the ground. The boys stand victorious over the giant carcass, completely out of breath. Lucas immediately brags that he killed it and claims this victory will bring the Wykes family name back into the spotlight. Elijah ignores him and praises Arthur for coming up with the battle plan. Arthur humbly states that those who possess power must bear the responsibility that comes with it. He admits he watches over Lucas because the arrogant noble reminds him of his past self when he was younger. Suddenly, the massive monster starts twitching, revealing it is still alive despite taking all their strongest attacks. The boys are completely exhausted and have almost no stamina or mana left to defend themselves. Just as the beast prepares to strike them down, Jasmine arrives on the scene with Sylvie. Jasmine draws her weapons and uses her incredible speed to unleash a flurry of powerful wind slashes, completely destroying the monster in a matter of seconds. Arthur is incredibly relieved and thanks Jasmine for saving his life. Jasmine smiles and tells him they are a party, so she will always protect him. Their moment of victory is immediately ruined when a small, fox-like creature suddenly dashes out from the bushes, snatches the monster's extremely valuable purple mana core, and eats it in one bite. Lucas and Elijah scream in pure horror and chase after the creature, completely devastated that their hard-earned loot was stolen right in front of them. Meanwhile, back in the floating city of Xyrus, Tessia sits at an outdoor cafe with her friends Vio and Faye. They are relentlessly teasing her because she still hasn't visited Arthur, despite rushing all the way to the city just to see him. They joke that she is getting cold feet and is too scared to face him after all this time. Flustered and incredibly embarrassed by their teasing, Tessia blushes heavily and stubbornly declares she will go see him right now just to prove them wrong. She angrily slams a gold coin onto the wooden table to pay for her drink and marches away down the stone-paved street. She walks through the city until she reaches the massive iron gates of the Helstia estate where Arthur lives. She stops outside to hype herself up, clenching her fists and reminding herself that she is an elven princess, so greeting an old friend shouldn't be difficult at all. However, her nerves completely take over, and she starts fruitlessly shaking the locked iron gates in a blind panic. Overwhelmed by anxiety, she accidentally bumps directly into a bearded man standing outside the estate. She hastily stammers an apology and immediately sprints away in a rapid blur, totally abandoning her plan to see Arthur today. The bearded man watches her run off and cheerfully notes how amazing it is to see elves freely wandering around Xyrus. He takes her presence as a clear sign that the new peace alliance between the human and elf kingdoms is working perfectly. At the exact same time, deep within a hidden stone chamber, two mysterious hooded figures stand over a table illuminating a magical map. They are closely observing the recent events across the continent. The figures watch a massive spiked beast radiating dark green magic roaming across a field, representing their growing monstrous army. The subordinate reports that their secret plans to cause chaos are moving very smoothly. However, the leader strokes his goatee and states that their current monsters are still not strong enough to achieve their ultimate goal. He declares they must find and capture an even more powerful specimen to properly prepare for the forthcoming day of their massive attack against the kingdoms. But that's where this story ends. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and see you in the next video.